Chapter 805. With the shadow armor, Murong Qingqing's strength had increased imperceptibly, and her survivability had also increased. With Murong Qingqing's demonic power cultivation base, she could probably maintain the shadow armor for a quarter of an hour. During this time, even strongest half-step kings wouldn't be able to do anything to her. However, defense and survivability were only a last resort. To truly increase her strength, she still needed an extremely sharp offensive artifact. As the two's guide, Wang Lan naturally gave them advice and suggestions. Gemstone Archipelago holds a large-scale auction every year. The location is the Golden Island in the middle of Gemstone Archipelago. Everything that can be auctioned is the best of the best. Although I've never been there, I've heard that even the lowest grade items are peak upper grade, with the majority being half-supreme grade items. The finale items can even make half-step kings go crazy. Sometimes, even life and death kings would come and participate in the bidding. How much time is left until the auction? Yi Chen's heart shook as he asked. Wang Lan said, about a month and a half. During this time, you two should prepare a lot of spirit stones. A month and a half, not bad. Yi Chen faintly nodded. As for spirit stones, they didn't lack them at all. Although Murong Qingqing had used 34 million upper-grade spirit stones, she still had 70 million left. As for Yi Chen, after obtaining Lin Yushuan's storage ring, he had 180 million upper-grade spirit stones. If not for mysterious Yin King being so powerful that he didn't have the time to obtain other people's storage rings, his spirit stones would be in the hundreds of millions. The higher the level of a martial artist, the less they would feel the flow of time. Often, a month would pass without them noticing. For ordinary people, a month was a very long time. They could do many things, become rich overnight, or go bankrupt overnight. In this month, apart from raising his cultivation base, Yi Chen spent the rest of his time cultivating Waning Moon and Bewitching Mirror Shattering. Of course, the foundation of Space Profound was even more important. Waning Moon was a fusion profound martial skill, containing 80% metal profound and 60% water profound. Although it had been surpassed by the Bewitching Mirror Shattering, it still had a lot of potential to be unearthed. Moreover, the Bewitching Mirror Shattering consumed a lot of Zhenyuan, while Waning Moon consumed a lot less. If he wanted to improve the metal profound and water profound, it would naturally be extremely difficult. After all, the state of being one with the world could only be obtained when breaking through realms. Although it was said to be a realm breakthrough, it was actually just a transition period. Since he couldn't improve his profoundness in a short time, Yi Chen didn't want to waste his time. Instead, he focused his research on fusing the metal and water profoundness. This month's time had not been wasted. As the degree of fusion increased, Yi Chen felt that Waning Moon's power had increased. His execution speed had also increased. Bewitching Mirror Shattering contained the Space Profound. 40% Space Profound, in terms of pure power amplification, was already equivalent to 120% Ordinary Profound. It was 2 levels higher than Ordinary Perfection Profound. This was Yi Chen's ace in the hole, and also a super killing move that he wouldn't casually use. After witnessing the might of a demonic king, Yi Chen felt that he had to cultivate Bewitching Mirror Shattering to perfection as soon as possible. Although he would still be killed by the demonic human king after cultivating it to perfection, at least he had something to look forward to, which was better than no progress at all. Pop! With a wave of his sword, the fake mountain in the courtyard warped and folded, disappearing all of a sudden. Wang Lan, who happened to see this scene from the yard next door, was shocked. She could also destroy the fake mountain completely, and any condensing reality realm warrior could do it. It would be too easy. But Yi Chen, who did not release any chi power, and made the fake mountain disappear without a trace, it was something she had never seen before. Of course, the fake mountain didn't disappear, but was devoured by the space power. Such a fragile thing could be directly skipped out on the process of disappearing. Another half a month passed, and the Golden Islands auction was about to begin. On this day, under Wang Lan's guidance, the three flew toward the Golden Island in the center of the Gemstone Islands. The island was already filled with people. Under the illumination of the sunlight, the island was suffused with a faint golden color. The people on the island were all Sea of Soul Realm experts or half-step kings. There was not a single person below the Sea of Soul Realm. Wang Lan said, "I can't go to Golden Island, so I'll send you here. You return to the garden first. Perhaps you'll be of use later." Wang Lan was, after all, a native of the Gemstone Islands. She couldn't be more familiar with this place. Before leaving the islands, she was the best choice as a guide, saving them a lot of time. On the island, Yi Chun and Murong Qingqing walked toward the only huge building on the island. The Golden Island auction house was entirely made of gold. Under the illumination of the sunlight, it flickered with a dazzling golden light. It was 100 times more magnificent than any building in Yi Chen's world. If the whole thing was moved there, it would definitely be called a miracle. Xiao. There were already enough people on the island, but groups of people still landed on the island. Among them, there was no lack of half-step kings with astonishing auras. "Let's go in." At the entrance of the auction house, Yi Chun and Murong Qingqing strode in. The Golden Island auction house didn't have any VIP rooms. The front row was filled with a large number of spectators, while the back row was filled with empty areas. Each area was separated by a golden fence. Inside, there was a table, a few soft leather chairs, and beautiful maids standing to the side. Yi Chun naturally didn't want to be squeezed with others, so he and Murong Qingqing sat in the back row. In fact, the place Yi Chun had chosen was precisely prepared for half-step kings. Sitting on the leather chairs, beautiful maids poured tea for the two. There were also fresh fruits and pastries on the table. Quite a lot of people. Leaning against the back of the chair, Yi Chun took a sip of tea. Darklight King is also here. Murong Qingqing saw the Darklight King in the third area. Darklight King clearly saw the two as well. The killing intent in his eyes wasn't concealed at all, causing the surrounding people to retreat, not daring to sit too close. Yi Chun faintly smiled and didn't look at the other party. As time passed, the spectators' seats in the auction house gradually filled up, and the empty area in the back was filled with many half-step kings. Among these half-step kings, there were many worthy of attention. For example, Shi Xiaobao, who had arrived at Gemstone Islands at some unknown time, the eccentric old man in raincoat, and Huang Mei, who had already met Yi Chun. Apart from them, there were also a few people who attracted Yi Chun's attention. For example, two women in white robes. One was a bit older, in her 30s, with a dignified appearance. The other was in her 20s, with exquisite facial features. She was Yu Bingxin of the Silver Moon White Fox clan. Both had a silver crescent moon tattoo on their foreheads. Yu Bingxin sensed Yi Chen's gaze and looked over. When she saw Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing, a pleasantly surprised smile blossomed on her face. "Young Master Yi, I didn't expect to see you here." Yu Bingxin transmitted her voice. Yi Chen said, "A coincidence indeed. Seems like the Moonlight Island of your Silver Moon White Fox clan isn't too far from Gemstone Islands." "It's not too far," Yu Bingxin said. "Bingxin, who are you talking to?" The dignified woman beside Yu Bingxin revealed a strange expression when she saw Yu Bingxin looking at Yi Chun. "Auntie, he's the young Master Yi Chun I've been talking about. In chaotic demonic ocean, he killed the experts of the demonic humans and saved my life." "Oh, it's him. Then you should properly thank them." The dignified woman revealed a faint smile toward Yi Chun, her expression carrying a trace of gratitude. If not for Yi Chun, Yu Bingxin would have already been captured by the demonic humans. With the strength of the Silver Moon White Fox clan, they simply wouldn't have been able to rush over to the demonic humans and rescue her. "You too, I'm Yu Bingxin's auntie, Yu Lingshuang. Many thanks for saving my life. If there's any trouble, I won't shirk my duty." Yi Chun said, "It's nothing. After chatting for a while, both sides stopped. During this time, Yu Lingshuang noticed that the Darklight King was occasionally staring at Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing with overflowing killing intent. She creased her brows and said, "Bingxin, I'm afraid your benefactor's situation isn't good. I can see that the Darklight King has a big grudge with him. What should we do?" Yu Bingxin didn't notice this and immediately became anxious. She had also heard of the Darklight King's name. Under Life and Death Realm, very few were his opponent. Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing had offended him, and their fate was grim. It would be difficult for them to leave Gemstone Islands. "Auntie, save them." Yu Bingxin pulled Yu Lingshuang's sleeve. "Even if you don't say it, I won't watch them die. It's just that, with the Darklight King's strength, I'm not sure if I can repel him. I can't protect them forever, unless he's willing to come with us to Moonlight Island as a guest. I believe he won't dare to linger around Moonlight Island for a while. Once he leaves, he can leave without a trace." Yu Lingshuang was a rare genius of Moonlight Island. Since she dared to protect Yi Chen, she was naturally a strongest half-step king. Hearing her auntie's words, Yu Bingxin heaved a sigh of relief. Once the auction was over, she would certainly persuade Yi Chen to go to Moonlight Island. After a cup of tea's worth of time, the auction house was nearly full. The auctioneer stood on the stage and said a few words. Then, he waved his hand, and two beautiful maids walked up with a round plate. The auction had begun. Just as Wang Lan had said, the lowest grade items were peak upper grade treasures. The first item was a dagger radiating a cold light. Its color was bright red, as if it had been soaked in blood. The starting bid was 150,000 upper grade spirit stones. After a round of bidding, the dagger was bought by one person for 350,000 upper grade spirit stones. With dozens of items sold, the auction entered its climax. The following items were all half-step extreme grade treasures, incomparably precious spirit herbs, rare materials whose names had never been heard of, or artifacts that everyone was going crazy over. The 37th item, a heart-protecting flower. On the stage, the auctioneer's face was glowing as he called out the next item. Heart-protecting flower. Yi Chen smiled bitterly. Before breaking through to half-step king realm, he had always wanted to find a heart-protecting flower. However, his wish had never been fulfilled. Who would have thought that he would see one after breaking through to half-step king realm? It was simply a freak accident. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Of course, although the heart-protecting flower was useless to him, it was extremely useful to those who had yet to break through to half-step king realm. Therefore, Yi Chen decided to buy it and leave it for Yi family as a treasure. However, Yi Chen had clearly underestimated the crowd's desire for the heart-protecting flower. Those Sea of Soul realm experts could naturally be ignored. Some half-step kings started bidding. Many of them had sects behind them, and this was a contribution to their sections. In the future, their sects would reward them with even more wealth. Chapter 806. 700,000. 750,000. 780,000. The starting price of the heart-protecting flower was 500,000 upper-grade spirit stones. The first bidder did not even think before adding 200,000, as if he wanted to intimidate the others. Unfortunately, no one bought it. What a joke! The market price of a single heart-nourishing flower was close to 300,000 spirit stones. As an essential spirit flower for entering half-step king realm, how could anyone be intimidated by a mere 200,000 spirit stones? 1,000,000. Yu Bingxin's aunt Yu Lingshuang raised her hand. 1,100,000. The next bidder was the Golden Lion clan's young lord, Shi Xiaobao. 1,200,000. Huang Mei also bid. Yi Chen originally wanted to bid, but seeing Huang Mei's interest, he hesitated and put down his hand. Huang Mei had helped him once in the mysterious Yin Tower. If she was determined to get the heart-protecting flower, Yi Chen decided to give it up. Of course, if the opposite party gave up on her own initiative, he would still bid. 1,400,000. This time, the bidder was none other than the brocade-robed old man from Glorious Exchanges, manager He. 2 million. Yu Ling Shuang was a millennium genius of the Silvermoon White Fox clan, so her wealth was definitely not small. Humph, 3 million. Shi Xiaobao sneered and added 1 million. Murong Qingqing didn't intend to bid and said with a smile, "It seems like this heart-protecting flower is going to reach a sky-high price. The rarer something is, the more valuable it is." Although the heart-protecting flower is only a semi-extreme grade spirit stone, its value is definitely not limited to that. Yi Chen said, 5 million. With a smile on her face, Huang Mei ruthlessly increased the bid by 2 million, shocking everyone in one fell swoop. 5 million high-grade spirit stones was already not an ordinary number. The majority of half-step kings didn't have that much wealth. Although the heart-protecting flower was very important to the sect and could increase the number of half-step kings, sometimes one couldn't be so one-sided. 5 million high-grade spirit stones might be able to create more half-step kings. After all, not everyone needed the heart-protecting flower to enter the half-step king realm. For example, if Yi Chen didn't want to enter the half-step king realm as soon as possible, he could wait for several months or even a year and a half. A year and a half was nothing to a Sea of Soul realm expert. Therefore, even the arrogant Shi Xiaobao gave up on bidding, as it wasn't worth it. 5 million? Forget it. Yu Ling Shuang also stopped bidding and looked at Huang Mei with interest. 1 million. The brocade-robed old man, Steward He, didn't want to give up yet. 5,500,000. Huang Mei's expression was calm. Humph. Exhaling, Steward He leaned back in his leather chair and stopped bidding. 5 million going once 5. 5 million going twice 5. 5 million going thrice sold. The auctioneer slammed his gavel, his face full of excitement. The heart-protecting flower was not something that could be found all the time. It was definitely out of his expectations that it could be sold for 5 million. None of the following items were sold for more than 5 million, far less than the heart-protecting flower. The atmosphere in the auction hall also dropped slightly. The 42nd auction item is a set of top-notch high-grade artifact. It consists of armor, greaves, boots, bracers, and gloves. The starting price is 5 million high-grade spirit stones. After the heart-protecting flower, another heavyweight auction item appeared on the stage. A single top-notch high-grade artifact wasn't enough for half-step kings. However, a full set was a different story. In terms of defense, it surpassed the majority of half-step extreme-grade artifact. Apart from that, wearing a full set of artifacts would increase one's speed, attack speed, and offensive power. 3 million. Sure enough, many half-step kings were moved. They didn't have a pseudo-extreme-grade artifact, so a full set of top-notch high-grade artifacts was naturally the best choice. 5 million. 4 million. In the end, this set of artifacts was bought by a half-step king for 6 million. The 48th auction item is a pair of purple flame demonic light gloves, a half-step extreme-grade replica of the 3 most famous extreme-grade gloves of the past 100,000 years. The blazing divine light gloves contains the power of fire and darkness. Among all the half-step extreme-grade artifacts, it is definitely a top-notch artifact, not inferior to the majority of pseudo-extreme-grade artifacts. The starting price is 8 million high-grade spirit stones, and each bid must be at least 500,000 high-grade spirit stones. The bidding starts now. If a full set of top-notch high-grade artifacts was considered heavyweight, then the purple flame demonic light gloves was super heavyweight. Just the fact that it was not inferior to the majority of pseudo-extreme-grade artifacts was enough to make half-step kings go crazy. Not to mention, this pair of gloves contained the power of fire and darkness. Just as the auctioneer's voice faded, Darklight King loudly said, 10 million. What? Darklight King is also bidding? Doesn't he have a pair of pseudo-extreme-grade gloves? Everyone was shocked. You guys don't know, but Darklight King only has one glove, and it's not complete. Moreover, the purple flame demonic light gloves contains the power of fire and darkness. Darklight King's Zhen Yuan happens to be of the fire attribute, and he also comprehended fire profound. How could he not bid? So that's how it is. It seems like this pair of gloves belongs to Darklight King. More or less. Be it in terms of wealth or strength, Darklight King was not someone ordinary could compare to. Even if he didn't threaten you, you wouldn't be able to compete with him. Moreover, if you provoked him, he might find an opportunity to kill you and seize your glove. Seeing Darklight King's bid, those who originally had some thoughts turned silent. Murong, it seems like we're going to have to contend with Darklight King again. Yi Chen laughed. Murong Qingqing also laughed and raised her hand. 12 million. You again. Darklight King fiercely looked at Murong Qingqing, his gaze cold and emotionless. What? Can't afford to play? Yi Chen flicked his fingers. 15 million. Darklight King turned his head. He currently had 34 million upper-grade spirit stones, and the other party had already spent more than 30 million. He didn't believe that he couldn't compete with Murong Qingqing. 16 million. This time, the bidder was not Murong Qingqing, but a tall and sturdy square-faced man. This person had extremely long arms and thick palms. With a single glance, one could tell that his martial arts were extremely powerful. It's Crimson Fire King. This is going to be interesting. This square-faced man was extremely famous in Gemstone Islands. He was one of the few experts under strongest half-step kings. He was equivalent to Jin Wanshuang, who had teamed up with Yi Chen a few months ago, or perhaps even stronger. Since Crimson Fire King dared to compete with Darklight King, he had to make a great decision. After all, the gloves were something that could only be chanced upon and not sought. Once he obtained them, his strength would definitely increase rapidly. 18 million. Murong Qingqing didn't raise the price to an outrageous level. She felt that 20 million was more or less the bottom line of these people. 19 million. Darklight King hesitated for a moment before adding another million. 19,500,000. Crimson Fire King only added 500,000. 20 million. Murong Qingqing made another bid. Damn it. Darklight King glanced at Murong Qingqing and his eyes flickered. He actually stopped bidding, seemingly giving up. Yi Chen observed his expression and naturally knew that Darklight King hadn't given up. Perhaps this person planned to kill both of them. That way, he wouldn't have to pay any spirit stones. 20,500,000. Red Flame King fiercely gritted his teeth. His entire fortune was only 18 million spirit stones, and some of his treasures could only be exchanged for 3 million spirit stones at most. This was already his limit. Any more and he would have nothing left. After bidding, he stared at Murong Qingqing. 21 million. Murong Qingqing indifferently said, "Huff." Heavily spitting out a mouthful of turbid qi, Crimson Fire King's face flickered with anger, but he didn't say anything else. 21 million going once, 21 million going twice, 21 million going thrice, sold. Congratulations to this young lady. The auctioneer suddenly slammed his gavel. Soon, someone delivered the purple flame demonic light gloves, and Murong Qingqing also paid 21 million upper-grade spirit stones. I'll help you refine the soul imprint in these gloves. If Murong Qingqing were to refine it, it would take several days. If Yi Chen were to refine it, it would take at most a cup of tea's time. It should be known that when he was at Late Sea of Soul Realm, he could refine the soul imprint of a half-step king in a short period of time. Now that he was at half-step king realm, although his soul power hadn't made any progress, its strength had increased several times. To avoid any unexpected problems, Yi Chen decided to let Murong Qingqing equip the gloves as soon as possible. Then, he would use the remaining time to familiarize himself with them. The purple flame demonic light gloves were a pair of black gloves with purple gold veined patterns. It was soft and smooth to the touch, and didn't have much weight. On the back of the gloves was a purple flame pattern. Under the flowing luster, it seemed to be burning. Receiving the purple flame demonic light gloves, Yi Chen's soul power invaded and easily erased the soul imprint inside. In less than a cup of tea's time, he succeeded. Putting on the purple flame demonic light gloves, Murong Qingqing gradually branded her own soul mark on them. Only with a soul mark could the power of this pair of gloves be maximized. While the two were busy, several items had already been auctioned off on the auction stage. The 52nd item is a sword forging art jade strip. The auctioneer paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and loudly announced, "Sword forging art." Yi Chen's eyes narrowed, flickering with a bright light. The auctioneer continued, "This sword forging art jade strip contains everything from low to semi-extreme grade sword forging knowledge. It even contains a small portion of extreme grade sword forging knowledge. If one can master it thoroughly, it is not impossible to forge an extreme grade sword." What? It even contains the knowledge of forging extreme grade sword forging? Everyone in the auction house was shocked. In the ancient era, forging artifacts was very developed. However, as time passed, a lot of knowledge was lost. In the modern era, the highest grade artifacts that could be forged were semi-extreme grade artifacts. Moreover, only some super forces had the knowledge of forging extreme grade artifacts. Although it wasn't impossible for them to have knowledge of forging extreme grade artifacts, very few people had heard of it. Of course, to prevent people from thinking that my Golden Island auction house is deceiving everyone, I will once again declare that this jade strip contains only a small portion of extreme grade sword forging knowledge. Moreover, it is very incomplete. The auctioneer didn't dare to speak too confidently. What a joke! Some of the people in the auction house had very deep backgrounds. If he spoke too confidently, the forces behind them would definitely come to the auction house. Chapter 807. Even without supreme grade sword forging knowledge, this sword forging art jade strip will be of great use to the sect, Yi Chen said solemnly. Murong Qingqing faintly nodded. Mastering the knowledge in the sword forging art jade strip will allow one to continuously forge great swords. With enough time, a sect that has mastered the sword forging art would be able to raise a large number of sword forging masters and mass-produce great sword. This is something that cannot be measured with money. Sword forging art jade strips starting price is 15 million upper-grade spirit stones. Each increment must be no less than 500,000. Let the bidding begin. After explaining the situation, the auctioneer announced loudly, 16 million. Glorious Exchange's steward was the first to bid. 17 million. Shi Xiaobao didn't decline. 18 million. Yu Ling Shuang extended her right hand, her voice firm and powerful. This sword forging art jade strip needs at least 30 million before anyone will back out. Yi Chen wasn't in a hurry. He raised his teacup and took a sip. As Yi Chen had expected, the price of the sword forging art's jade strip continued to rise like a rocket. Those interested in the sword control art were not limited to the first three. Huang Mei, Scarlet Fire King, and some other half-step kings with powerful backgrounds also joined in, causing the price of the sword forging art to never stop. 35 million. The steward's voice was resounding. 38 million. Yu Ling Shuang seemed to have made up her mind to bring the sword forging art jade strip back to the Silvermoon White Fox clan. After all, it was too important to the clan. 40 million. Shi Xiaobao had already backed out of the bidding. His wealth was far from enough, and the auction house didn't accept credit. As a strongest half-step king, Huang Mei's wealth was unimaginable. Adding what she had obtained from mysterious Yin King's ruins, her wealth was probably nearing 100 million or even more. 40 million was like a feather to her. Yu Ling Shuang smiled bitterly at Yu Bingxin. If I had known earlier, I would have spent a bit more upper-grade spirit stones. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so helpless. Auntie, our Silvermoon White Fox clan doesn't have many sword users. Let's forget about it, Yu Bingxin suggested. Alright, let them compete. With her hands clasped together, Yu Lingshuang leaned against the leather chair and relaxed. The bidding continued. Apart from manager He and Huang Mei, who were determined to get the sword forging art jade strip, there was another half-step king who was not that famous. There are 3 people left. It's about time for us to participate. Yi Chen had many concerns. He was afraid that Huang Mei would be the only one left in the end. It wouldn't be good for him to bid, but it also wouldn't be good if he didn't bid. After all, although he was indebted to Huang Mei, he had to obtain the sword forging technique Jade Scroll. 50 million. Putting down the teacup, Yi Chen stretched out his right hand. Him again. Steward, he was furious. So, young Master Yi is also interested in the sword forging art. Huang Mei looked at Yi Chen and transmitted her voice to him. Yi Chen said, I'm sorry, it's rare for me to be interested in this sword forging technique jade strip. How about this? After I win it, I'll share everything apart from supreme grade sword forging knowledge with you. I don't think you have too much hope for the supreme grade sword forging knowledge inside. Right, the knowledge of a damaged supreme grade sword forging is of little use. Since that's the case, I'll help you achieve your dream. Immediately, Huang Mei gave up. 51 million. While bidding, Steward He transmitted his voice to Yi Chen, little brother, I'm Glorious Exchange's Steward He. Previously, there seemed to be some conflict between us, but as the steward of Glorious Exchanges, I have no choice in some matters. If little brother gives up, I can overstep my authority and give you a Glorious Exchanges token. In the future, as long as you set up a stall in my Glorious Exchanges, your fees will be waived. The fees charged by Glorious Exchanges were not low. The first floor was 5%, the second floor was 4%, and the third floor was 3%. In other words, selling a treasure worth 10 million could save 300,000. Once or twice didn't seem like much, but after a long time, it could save a lot of spiritual stones. Yi Chen sneered. This steward, he was really insincere if he wanted to send him away with a Glorious Exchanges token. Moreover, his tone was more or less threatening, as if he was saying, don't be so shameless. Of course, if it was someone else, they might agree, but Yi Chen didn't need to think about it. He wouldn't be staying in Gemstone Islands for long anyway, so the Glorious Exchanges token was useless to him. 52 million. Yi Chen continued bidding. It seems like little brother doesn't want to give face to Glorious Exchanges. Steward He's face darkened, a hint of killing intent appearing at the corner of his mouth. Of course I have to give face to Glorious Exchanges, but you don't have the qualifications to represent Glorious Exchanges. Yi Chen said sarcastically. I hope you won't regret it. Steward He gritted his teeth and said. He didn't try to persuade Yi Chen anymore. When the price rose to 56 million, Steward He gave up. He could only mobilize 50 to 60 million spiritual stones. In fact, the price he had in mind was not more than 60 million. After all, he had no idea how useful the knowledge in the swordsmithing art was. If he didn't buy it, it would be a great loss if it wasn't worth the price. 58 million. In the end, there was only one person left to compete with Yi Chen. The sword chi on this person's body was very sharp. He was a half-step sword king. The sect he belonged to was the Thousand Swords sect, which was not far from the Gemstone Islands. Basically, everyone in the sect used swords. Therefore, this jade slip of the Imperial Sword technique would play an important role in the Thousand Swords sect. 60 million. Yi Chen's expression turned solemn. It seemed like this person had prepared for this. The two continued bidding. Soon, the price rose to 70 million. The huge number made everyone in the auction hall suck in a cold breath. 70 million upper-grade spiritual stones. They wouldn't be able to get this price even if they sold themselves. If they had so many spiritual stones, they could arm themselves to the teeth. 71 million. Yi Chen's expression was solemn, but his opponent's expression was 10 times more solemn. Gemstone Islands had a branch of the Thousand Swords sect, which was why he had so many spiritual stones. However, Yi Chen didn't seem to have a limit. No matter how much he bid, Yi Chen would increase without any hesitation. This made him lose all confidence. 75 million. Letting out a breath, Yi Chen increased the price by 4 million. He was determined to get the sword forging technique. This was not for the present, but for the future. When he became a life and death king, he would have the ability to roam the starry sky. If he could find some supreme-grade materials, he would be able to forge supreme-grade swords. How fast would that be? Although the knowledge in the sword forging technique wasn't much, it should be enough to build a foundation. The other party turned silent. 75 million. He couldn't afford it. The auctioneer waited for a while. Seeing that no one else was bidding, he knew that the price had reached 75 million. Holding the hammer in his hand, he walked to the front of the auction stage and said loudly, 75 million. Is there anyone else? If not, this sword forging technique belongs to this little brother. Nobody spoke. Alright, 75 million going once, 75 million going twice, 75 million going thrice. Sold. Congratulations to this little brother. With a clang, the auctioneer slammed the hammer. Soon, someone delivered the sword forging technique. Without any hesitation, Yi Chen handed over 75 million upper-grade spirit stones. The sword-smithing technique was the finale item of this auction. Thus, the auction came to an end. Someone had calculated that the total price of this auction was 420 million. Compared to the previous auctions, it was 30 to 40% higher. This was definitely a large-scale auction that was rarely seen in 10 years. Before leaving, Darklight King and manager, he coldly glanced at Yi Chen. The half-step Sword King from Thousand Swords sect also stared at Yi Chen for a long time. Seems like I can't stay here for long. Yi Chen sighed inwardly. He wasn't afraid of Darklight King, but the glorious exchanges in Thousand Swords sect behind manager, he made him apprehensive. Who knew if the sword forging technique would provoke a life and death king? Let's go back to the garden. Gemstone Islands didn't have any life and death kings, so Yi Chen needed to do something useful in this short period of time. Leaving the Golden Island auction house, the two hurried back to the garden. At this moment, the sky was already dark. In the bedroom, Yi Chen took out the sword forging technique and poured his soul power inside. Buzz. A cool and refreshing feeling suddenly rushed into Yi Chen's mind, turning into countless chaotic tiny symbols. The symbols then rearranged themselves, ultimately turning into a complete knowledge of sword forging technique. Low grade, mid grade, upper grade, and semi-supreme grade were clearly separated. After the semi-supreme grade, there was a short and incomplete section on forging supreme grade swords. Sure enough, it's real. Yi Chen simulated it in his mind and felt that the content was real. Although he had never studied sword forging technique as a sword artist, he always had some inexplicable intuition. However, the initial stage of forging a sword requires a large amount of materials. Even a genius in forging swords would not be able to succeed on his first try. Even if he succeeds, it does not mean anything. The art of forging swords is broad and profound, and it is not something that can be mastered in a day or two. It is also not something that can be deepened with just 1 or 2 tries. The sky turned dark and the night passed peacefully. Early the next morning, Yi Chen had Wang Lan bring them to the Yellow Islands. Yellow Islands sold all kinds of materials, spirit grasses, precious ores, gems of various attributes, and basically anything one could wish for. According to the grade of the materials, they were divided into light yellow islands, bright yellow islands, and orange islands. Light yellow islands sold low-grade to mid-grade materials, bright yellow islands sold mid-grade to upper-grade materials, and orange islands sold upper-grade to semi-supreme grade materials. As for whether one could find a supreme grade material, it depended on luck. Instead of going straight to the Orange Island, Yi Chen's trio went to the light yellow island. Without a change in expression, Yi Chen bought over 10,000 sets of low-grade materials and several thousand mid-grade materials. For a moment, the light yellow island was in short supply of materials for forging artifacts. Following the same pattern, Yi Chen looted the bright yellow and orange islands, buying a total of 12,000 sets of different low-grade materials, 5,000 sets of different mid-grade materials, and 2,000 upper-grade and semi-supreme-grade materials. He even got 3 sets of supreme-grade materials. If not for an upper-grade storage ring and many mid-grade and low-grade storage rings, Yi Chen wouldn't have been able to store so many materials. After buying the materials, Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing prepared to leave. There were too many powers in Gemstone Islands, and staying here wouldn't bring them any good. Lord Darklight King, they've left. In the tea house, a person walked to Darklight King's side and reported. Well done. Darklight King put down the teacup in his hand and abruptly stood up, his face overflowing with killing intent. Chapter 808. After leaving the Gemstone Islands, Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing headed south. Hundreds of millions of li away was a place Battle King had once visited. The reason Yi Chen had come to the southern deep sea was precisely because of this. He wanted to see if that place was like the one in Battle King's memories. In one night, Murong Qingqing had already branded her soul imprint on the inside of the purple flame demonic glove. At this moment she was fiddling with the purple flames, which were the inherent power of the glove and possessed extremely powerful corrosive properties. As the purple flames receded, a faint black light pattern appeared on the surface of the glove. This was the dark halo formed by the dark energy. It had a tremendous amplification effect on warriors with dark energy. As for how much amplification it was, it could only be determined through a battle. 1,000 li behind the two, a flickering black radiance streaked across the sky and chased after them with astonishing speed. Its speed was so fast that it couldn't even be described as lightning. What belongs to me will belong to me. Enveloped in the black radiance, Darklight King's eyes were ice-cold and emotionless. With a swish, his speed increased once again, and the black radiance flickered faintly. Coming! Yi Chen sensed a powerful fluctuation rapidly approaching from behind. Turning around, he saw Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing standing side by side. Swish! With a flicker of black radiance, Darklight King appeared 10 li away from the two. You two are truly daring. You actually didn't increase your speed to the maximum. Darklight King was somewhat surprised. The speed of a half-step king wouldn't be too far off. Although he was confident in catching up to Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing, he didn't expect them to be this fast. Why would we hide from you? In fact, we were waiting for you. Fortunately, you didn't disappoint us. Yi Chen said indifferently. Arrogant. Darklight King was infuriated by Yi Chen's attitude. A black radiance burst out from his body, making him look like a shining black sun. His powerful aura caused the ocean to surge violently. Yi Chen, let me. Murong Qingqing took a step forward. That's good. You can test out how strong the shadow armor and purple flame magic glove are. Yi Chen nodded. With the shadow armor, even if Murong Qingqing faced a veteran, strongest, half-step king like the Darklight King, she would be invincible. Moreover, with the purple flame demonic glove, Murong Qingqing's offensive power had already surpassed the majority of half-step kings, allowing her to clash head-on with the strongest half-step king. As for how powerful Murong Qingqing would be, Yi Chen couldn't make a precise guess, because he himself had never exchanged blows with the strongest half-step king. You are sending your woman to her death. Don't think that just because she has the shadow armor and the purple flame demonic light gloves, I can't do anything to her. The power of a strongest half-step king is something you will never understand. The dark bright king was so angry that he started laughing. The black radiance on his body became even more dazzling. The piercing black radiance illuminated everything within several hundred li. There's going to be a war over there. Several thousand li away, many people were rushing over. They were Huang Mei, Yu Lingshuang, Yu Bingxin, Scarlet Fire King, Steward He, as well as some well-informed half-step kings. Huang Mei's speed was the fastest. As she moved, she was like a flickering yellow light. With each flicker, she covered a distance of 100 li. Scarlet Fire King was second only to Huang Mei. With his entire body covered in flames, he was like a blazing meteor, emitting a dazzling fiery radiance. Steward He had brought a total of 4 half-step kings. Nobody knew what their intentions were, but their speed was very fast. They were clearly first-rate half-step kings. Yu Lingshuang probably hadn't raised her speed to the limit. Together with Yu Bingxin, 2 streaks of silver light streaked toward the dazzling black sun ahead. Auntie, faster! Yu Bingxin mustered her strength and continuously accelerated. I'll bring you along. Yu Lingshuang smiled bitterly and grabbed Yu Bingxin's arm. The silver moon white fox phantom suddenly appeared behind her. With a swish, its speed doubled. At a glance, it seemed as if it was leaping in the void. Swish, 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 nearly 20 people flew toward the three's location at the same time. Yi Chen and the other 2 had also sensed their arrival, so they exchanged glances. I forgot to say goodbye to Yu Bingxin. Yi Chen had left in a hurry. Although he had coincidentally met Yu Bingxin in the Golden Island auction house, he hadn't seen her again. Young Master Yi, this person is extremely powerful. You should let my auntie help you. From afar, Yu Bingxin's voice wrapped in Zhen Yuan transmitted to Yi Chen's ears. Many thanks for your kindness, but there's no need. Yi Chen tactfully declined. Yu Bingxin anxiously said, strongest half-step kings are not as simple as you think. They are different from ordinary half-step kings. They have already refined Zhen Yuan into their bone marrow. Refining Zhen Yuan into blood vessels could allow one to reach half-step king realm. When all 3 blood vessels were filled with Zhen Yuan, one would have to refine Zhen Yuan into the bone marrow. Once one reached this step, not only would their Zhen Yuan be incomparably robust, but its purity would also be incomparable to before. At this point, as long as one's profound martial skills and martial spirit reached the standard, one could be considered a strongest half-step king. I know. How could Yi Chen not know the strength of strongest half-step kings? Just the disparity in Zhen Yuan alone was not something ordinary methods could make up for. Since you know, why are you still? Yu Bingxin was puzzled. Bingxin, let me talk to him. Yu Lingshuang stopped Yu Bingxin and said to Yi Chen, Young Master Yi, perhaps you have some understanding of strongest half-step kings, but you definitely don't know as much as I do. After all, I'm a strongest half-step king himself. To become a strongest half-step king, refining Zhen Yuan into the bone marrow is only the most basic. My martial spirit might not necessarily be that much more powerful than the majority of half-step kings, only a slight increase in strength. As for profound martial skills, I've heard Bingxin say that your profound martial skills are not the least bit inferior to strongest half-step kings, and might even surpass them. However, Yu Lingshuang's tone changed as she continued, strongest half-step king is only a general term. In fact, at this realm, one has already entered the first layer of Life and Death Challenge. The so-called Life and Death Challenge is a bridge leading to Life and Death realm. There are 3 layers in total. Once one breaks through the 3rd layer, one will officially become a Life and Death realm king. However, the first layer is easy, but the second layer is extremely difficult. Precisely because of this difficulty, the gap between each layer is not small. According to my guess, Darklight King had already reached the second layer a year ago, and his strength is much higher than the first layer of strongest half-step kings. Then, what layer is Senior Yu at? Yi Chen asked. Yu Lingshuang said, I'm currently at the peak of the first layer. However, with the bloodline power of the Silver Moon White Fox clan, it won't be difficult for me to fight the second layer. Although I'm grateful for Senior Yu's good intentions, Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing have the confidence to fight the Darklight King. Senior Yu, just wait and see. With Battle King's memories, there was nothing Yi Chen didn't know regarding cultivation. However, Murong Qingqing possessed demonic power and dark force field, as well as the shadow armor and purple flame demonic glove. She might not necessarily have the strength to fight the Darklight King. As for Yi Chen himself, there was no need to even mention it. Forget it. I know that youngsters are arrogant. Perhaps you two will indeed give me a big shock. Yu Lingshuang shook her head. Since she couldn't convince Yi Chen, she might as well let them suffer a bit. In any case, she would be watching from the side, ready to lend a helping hand at the crucial moment. Young Master Yi, Miss Murong, you must be careful. Seeing that the other party was still full of confidence even after her aunt had said this much, Yu Bingxin no longer tried to persuade them. She had a faint feeling that Yi Chen might really give them a big shock. Yi Chen, Miss Murong, I believe the two of you will make the Darklight King eat a big loss. Unlike Yu Lingshuang, Huang Mei knew Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing very well. As far as she was concerned, the two belonged to the inhuman category. Of course, Murong Qingqing was indeed inhuman, and possessing superhuman strength was understandable. On the other hand, Yi Chen belonged to the inhuman category. Hee. Yi Chen chuckled. After a while, those who had rushed over to watch the battle stopped and watched from afar. The Darklight King might not have 100% chance of winning 1 against 2, but he should have a 70 to 80% chance. I wonder what their real strength is. None of the spectators were ordinary characters. Each of them had keen eyesight. Although the Darklight King was a veteran strongest half-step king, he also had a pseudo-supreme grade artifact, and perhaps more than 1 or 2. The reason they had come was partly to watch the show, and partly to fish in troubled waters. Licking his lips, the Darklight King sneered, "It's been a long time since I've slaughtered. Today, I'll let you two experience my strength." The fact that he had reached the second layer of life and death chamber was only known by a few people. Only strongest half-step kings could sense it. Murong, be careful. Yi Chen signaled Murong Qingqing with his eyes. I know, I won't be careless. Murong Qingqing flew out and stopped 5 li away from the Darklight King. What? 1 against the Darklight King? I thought that kid had some ability. Who would have thought that he's relying on a woman? But, this woman's strength alone doesn't even have a 10% chance against the Darklight King. Even if they're confident, they're too arrogant. Do they think the words of strongest half-step kings are spoken casually? Everyone's faces were filled with puzzlement, and soon after, they revealed expressions of pity. The two of them were probably going to die. The Darklight King wasn't in the mood to talk with the two. His body flickered with a black light, and as if teleporting, he flew toward Murong Qingqing at an extreme speed. Spreading open his right hand, a flickering black light faintly appeared. Retreat! Murong Qingqing roared, and a purple-black electric current surged out of her body. The dark shadow armor was immediately activated, and a formless and powerful force field fiercely radiated out with her as the center. Due to the force field being too powerful, the magnetic field of the heaven and earth was distorted, and wind, fire, thunder, and lightning flickered simultaneously. Pop! A shocking scene occurred. How did the Darklight King arrive? How did he fly back? The frightening recoil caused his face to turn pale, and his eyeballs to almost pop out. This time was different from the previous exchange with Yi Chen. Murong Qingqing had pushed the dark force field to the limit, fusing it with the heavenly star force field. Even a strongest half-step king wouldn't be able to get close to her. The might of the dark shadow armor was fully displayed on Murong Qingqing's body. Chapter 809. What a powerful force field! Yu Lingshuang sucked in a breath of cold air. As a strongest half-step king, she knew better than anyone how much power was required to repel them with a force field. After all, the Zhen Yuan of a strongest half-step king had already reached the peak of half-step king realm. Sure enough, Huang Mei revealed a faint smile. She had already witnessed Murong Qingqing's dark force field. However, back then, she didn't put it in her eyes at all. However, the current dark force field was something that even she had to sigh in admiration. Thinking about it, it should be thanks to the shadow armor. Darklight King was actually repelled by the force field? This is too exaggerated. Dark shadow armor, it's definitely the dark shadow armor. No wonder she didn't hesitate to fall out with Darklight King and buy it. If my guess is correct, she cultivated some kind of force field. Combined with the heavenly star force field of the dark shadow armor, it's not as simple as 1+1. I was wondering why she dared to fight Darklight King alone. Turns out she had a trump card. Everyone discussed spiritedly, feeling shocked. Humph, the dark shadow armor is a pseudo-supreme grade artifact. Activating it requires a large amount of Zhen Yuan. Let's see how long you can last. The head steward's eyes flickered as he inwardly sneered. Young Lady Murong has such a powerful force field that even Darklight King can't approach her. Is she undefeatable? Yu Bingxin said happily. Yu Lingshuang shook her head. A pseudo-supreme grade artifact is no small matter. But it's still too early to say she's undefeatable. Unless she can activate her defensive artifact, the outcome won't change. At most, she'll only be able to buy some time. After flying back dozens of li, Darklight King finally managed to stabilize his body. At this moment, his breathing was ragged, and his chest was heaving up and down. Although the sudden repulsive force didn't injure him too much, it wasn't pleasant either. Just a moment ago, his heart had almost reached its limit due to inertia. After all, being pushed back dozens of li while moving at full speed would not feel good. If one's cultivation base was a bit weaker, they might even be killed by the repulsive force. Good. Darklight King said good twice in a row. He really didn't expect the other party to have such a trick up their sleeve. No wonder they didn't put him in their eyes for the sake of this shadow armor. It turned out that they were after the heavenly star force field of the shadow armor. But do you think I can't do anything to you just because you have a force field protecting you? The Darklight King stared at Murong Qingqing, taking the opportunity to recover. Murong Qingqing said lightly, "You said it yourself, I didn't." The Darklight King grinned. The further you are from the force field, the smaller the effect. I wonder if you can block my long-range attack. In most situations, close-range attacks were the most powerful. However, with the Darklight King's strength, his attack wouldn't be weakened by much if the distance was a little further, and it would still have terrifying destructive power. Murong Qingqing's dark force field made him give up on the idea of ending the battle in an instant, because he knew that it wasn't realistic. Bring it on. The surface of Murong Qingqing's body flickered with purplish-black electricity, but her expression did not change. I'll let you know the difference between us. The Darklight King's discomfort had been completely dispelled. He approached Murong Qingqing neither too fast nor too slow, as if trying to estimate the safest distance between him and Murong Qingqing. Dark Devour. Since the Darklight King didn't attack, Murong Qingqing took the initiative. Her hands rapidly formed seals, and in the next instant, a revolving black sphere appeared beside the Darklight King. A powerful suction force burst out, wanting to devour the Darklight King. Break! The Darklight King reacted as soon as there was movement beside him. With a loud roar, he slapped the black sphere with his palm. Pung! The black sphere didn't accomplish anything and immediately exploded. Worthy of being a strongest half-step king. Seeing the Darklight King shatter the black light sphere so easily, Yi Chen couldn't help but sigh in admiration. This black light sphere was no ordinary energy. Shattering it required a frightening destructive power. Flying Assassinate Chop. Murong Qingqing naturally didn't think that a single Dark Devourer would be enough to deal with the Darklight King. She only did so to shorten the distance between them and use the dark force field to influence the Darklight King's movements and reduce his strength. With this, the gap between them would not be that big. Swish! With a flicker of light, Murong Qingqing instantly approached the Darklight King. Both of her palms turned into blades and chopped repeatedly, creating a black blade light in the void. Damn it! Just as Murong Qingqing had expected, the Darklight King was unable to attend to anything under the dark force field. Sometimes he wanted to retreat, but he was pulled forward. Sometimes he wanted to advance, but he was forced back by the repulsive force. He couldn't even bring out 40 to 50% of his strength, and was being suppressed by Murong Qingqing. If not for his high foundation and astonishing strength, he would have been killed by Murong Qingqing. This dark force field is too monstrous. The Darklight King is a veteran, strongest half-step king, but he's actually being suppressed to such a state. I thought the Darklight King would be able to deal with her effortlessly, but it seems like it won't be that easy. Let's just wait and see. Demonic Finger. Murong Qingqing's figure flickered as she slightly increased the distance between them and thrust out her strongest finger. Puff! Under the amplification of the purple flame demonic glove, the might of the sky demon finger was extremely terrifying. Not only was the power of darkness even more powerful, there was also a layer of purple flames on the surface of the sky demon finger. The scorching heat caused the surrounding space to distort, as if it would burn into nothingness at any moment. You really think I can't deal with you? Darklight Palm Art's first style, Darklight Palm Imprint. The Darklight King's face turned red as he forcefully circulated his Zhen Yuan to counteract the dark force field on his body. Then, he clenched his right hand and pressed his thumb against the edge of his palm, pushing it toward Murong Qingqing with a majestic aura. The dark force field distorted, and a shining black palm imprint shot upward, colliding with Murong Qingqing's demonic finger. Rumble! The violent energy ripples were like the eruption of a volcano or the arrival of a tsunami, sweeping across the sky. Under the impact of such a vast energy, the ocean within a radius of several thousand miles trembled, creating huge waves that roared endlessly. At the same time, two figures were sent flying back, unable to stop their bodies. Fire-Earth Fusion Profound Skill? Murong Qingqing's face was slightly pale. Even with the Darklight force field and the shadow armor protecting her, the blood qi and Zhen Yuan within her body were still boiling. This palm contained a powerful piercing attribute. If she didn't have the shadow armor, even if she didn't die, she would be crippled. The Darklight King wasn't having a good time either. Under the dark force field, he couldn't bring out his full strength. Moreover, Murong Qingqing had the purple flame demonic glove, which could raise her offense to a whole new level. Under such circumstances, he couldn't gain any advantage. A quarter of an hour has passed. You should have consumed more than half of your Zhen Yuan, but I haven't even used 10%. A strongest half-step king was, after all, a strongest half-step king. Darklight King quickly adjusted his condition and sent another palm strike at Murong Qingqing. This time, he didn't wait to get too close, fearing that Murong Qingqing would rapidly approach and use the dark force field to affect him. Pung! Murong Qingqing didn't say anything and used the demonic finger once more, clashing with the Darklight King from a distance. Ripples of energy rippled in the sky. Murong, display your speed advantage. There's no need to hide your perfect demonic bloodline anymore. At this moment, Yi Chen transmitted his Zhen Yuan to Murong Qingqing. Biting her lips, Murong Qingqing faintly nodded. Speed was her innate talent from the demons. If she didn't display her speed advantage, her demonic power would be exhausted sooner or later. Voila! A large black chi burst out, and a pair of huge black bat wings unfolded behind Murong Qingqing. With a slight flap, Murong Qingqing's figure instantly disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already above the Darklight King. Soul Extinguishing Wave. Holding a black light sphere in her hand, Murong Qingqing suddenly crushed it. Huff! A black light containing a soul attack fanned out, enveloping the Dark Light King within. The Dark Light King was blasted away. The pure offensive power of the soul extinguishing wave wasn't that powerful, so he didn't suffer any injuries. However, the soul attack contained within it made him somewhat dazed. He couldn't react in time and was immediately put at a disadvantage. Black Bat Wings. She has the perfect demonic bloodline of the demonic human race. Someone cried out in alarm. The previous battle had made everyone aware of Murong Qingqing's identity as a demonic human. However, they didn't think that she had the perfect demonic human bloodline. After all, the perfect demonic human bloodline was extremely rare. Even in the formidable chaotic demon ocean, there were only 2 of them. However, as soon as the Black Bat Wings appeared, it was hard for them not to know Murong Qingqing's identity. After all, it was too similar to the appearance of the demons in the ancient records. This, Bingxin, what's going on? Yu Lingshuang looked at Yu Bingxin. Yu Bingxin replied, I only know that she's a demonic human, not a perfect demonic human. However, she killed many people in chaotic demon ocean, so she shouldn't be from there. Not from chaotic demon ocean? Yu Lingshuang's face turned pensive, then she slowly said, Seems like I'm overthinking things. Apart from chaotic demon ocean, there are also demonic humans in other places. True Spirit Continent is millions and millions of li away from here. They should be from there. Very good. You actually forced me to this extent. You should be proud of yourself. However, this is still not enough. Now I'll let you witness my true strength. Dark Light King's figure shot back, increasing the distance between them. As he spoke, the black light on his body grew increasingly denser and more dazzling. Different from Murong Qingqing's demonic power, Dark Light King's Zhen Yuan gave off a scorching sensation that could scorch the earth. Buzz! Dark Light King's Zhen Yuan undulations suddenly rose to a whole new level, and a frightening heat wave spread out in all directions with him as the center. Life and Death Chamber's second layer. Yu Lingshuang's eyes shone brightly. Before this, Dark Light King had been contending against Murong Qingqing with the strength of the first layer. But now, he finally revealed his true strength. Chapter 8:10. Seems like I've still underestimated Dark Light King's strength. Yi Chun had no idea how powerful the second layer of Life and Death Chamber was. However, Dark Light King had suppressed his strength to the first layer, yet he was able to fight evenly with Murong Qingqing. One could easily imagine how powerful the second layer would be. Moreover, the reason why Murong Qingqing was able to contend against Dark Light King was because the latter didn't dare to engage in close combat. Now that Dark Light King had revealed his true strength, even if the dark force field was effective, it would be greatly reduced. Sure enough, no strongest half-step king can be underestimated. Becoming a life and death king didn't necessarily require one to become a strongest half-step king. In fact, the majority of people skipped this process and directly broke through from peak half-step king to life and death realm. However, their foundation would undoubtedly be a bit lacking. After becoming a life and death king, the undying body could only reach the realm of broken limb regrowth, which was a common path in life and death realm. However, if one became a strongest half-step king and then broke through to life and death realm, they could directly reach the second realm of undying body, flesh derivation, which would greatly increase their survivability and foundation. The reason for these two situations was actually related to one's potential and foundation. As for other factors, nobody could say for sure. Therefore, such a situation appeared in Elysium. Some people stopped at peak half-step king realm, unable to advance even an inch in their life. However, once their luck broke out, they would directly become life and death kings. On the other hand, after reaching peak half-step king realm, due to their solid foundation and high potential, they would enter the strongest half-step king realm, and then step by step, they would reach life and death realm. Although the former occupied the majority, it was only because of the large number. After all, peak half-step kings were many times more numerous than strongest half-step kings. Thus, the number of life and death kings was naturally higher. The latter might not necessarily become life and death kings, but the probability was extremely high, reaching 1 in 3 to 4. Generally speaking, 10% of newly ascended life and death kings within 100 years were strongest half-step kings, and 90% were peak half-step kings. Therefore, strongest half-step kings could be said to be a dividing line of potential. Those who could become strongest half-step kings had extremely high potential. After becoming life and death kings, they would be much more powerful than ordinary life and death kings. If they couldn't become strongest half-step kings, their potential would be one level lower. As a strongest half-step king, Dark Light King's potential was naturally not weak. Of course, Yi Chen didn't dare confirm that he had relied on his own potential to become a strongest half-step king. Elysium was boundless, and there might be some heavenly treasures that could increase one's potential. He die. Obsidian Palm. With his strength rising to the second layer, Dark Bright King roared and slammed his palm toward Murong Qingqing. The enormous palm imprint blotted out the sun, and a fiery chi wave swept out in all directions, evaporating the ocean waves. Swish! Not wanting to face Dark Bright King head-on, Murong Qingqing flapped her black bat wings and instantly disappeared. With her natural advantage in speed and the speed amplification of the shadow armor, Dark Bright King would have a hard time locking onto her. Where are you going? Dark Bright King thrust out dozens of palms in a row, sending out fiery palm energies. Swish! 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 Murong Qingqing's figure flickered unceasingly in the void, dodging palm energies one after another. Her extreme speed left everyone dumbfounded. Demonic finger! Suddenly, Murong Qingqing attacked Dark Bright King with her finger. Who could have expected that after reaching the second layer of life and death chamber, Dark Bright King's battle strength would be no small matter. With a single palm, he slapped away the black sun-like demonic finger. The power of the sky demon finger brushed against the surface of the ocean and left a terrifying mark. Finally, with a loud bang, it exploded and created a huge crater with a diameter of tens of miles. Soul-extinguishing wave. Murong Qingqing felt that her demonic power was about to be exhausted. Up until now, she had barely used any of her trump cards. Most of the time, she was using ordinary attacks to contend against Dark Bright King. It was not intentional, but the shadow armor and purple flame demonic gloves consumed too much demonic power. If not for the fact that she had activated the shadow armor in the middle of the battle, her demonic power would have been exhausted long ago. Even so, after using the soul-extinguishing wave, she didn't even have 10% of her demonic power left. The soul-extinguishing wave's range was too wide, and its speed was too fast. Dark Bright King knew that he couldn't dodge, so he circulated his martial will and arranged a will barrier in front of him. Boom! 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 The will barrier blocked the soul attack, and the protective Zhen Yuan blocked the soul-extinguishing wave's energy attack. Dark Bright King wasn't injured in the slightest. Demonic Fist. Suddenly, Murong Qingqing's speed soared, and she instantly appeared before Dark Bright King. Not good! Dark Bright King pushed his Zhen Yuan to the limit, and a flickering black light burst out. His whole body was like a black sun, burning fiercely. Large patches of black flames surged out, containing a terrifying power capable of scorching the earth. Just as he finished all of this, Murong Qingqing's attack arrived. Murong Qingqing's right hand clenched into a fist, and the black demonic power vortex on her fist became tighter and tighter before fiercely bombarding Dark Bright King's protective Zhen Yuan. Pung! This fist contained immense power, and a tyrannical demonic power burst out. With a swish, Dark Bright King was sent flying. Before that, he clenched his teeth and slammed his palm on Murong Qingqing's protective Zhen Yuan. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to exert his full power and was sent flying, leaving behind a black streak in the void. Puff! Murong Qingqing spurted out a huge mouthful of blood. Demonic Fist was the second martial art she had inherited from demons after Demonic Finger. Compared to Demonic Finger, Demonic Fist consumed a lot more demonic power, compressing a large amount of demonic power into the fist to deal several times more damage to the enemy. Unfortunately, Murong Qingqing didn't have much demonic power left. As soon as she used Demonic Fist, she didn't have much demonic power left in her body, causing the shadow armor to dim. Fortunately, Dark Bright King was also sent flying, and the palm didn't connect. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as simple as just vomiting blood. Compared to Murong Qingqing, Dark Bright King wasn't having a good time. He didn't have a pseudo-supreme grade defensive artifact, and could only rely on his protective Jin Yuan to resist Murong Qingqing's Demonic Fist. However, how could Demonic Fist be so easy to defend against? Therefore, he was injured for the first time by Murong Qingqing. With blood dripping down from the corner of his mouth, Dark Bright King stood dozens of li away with bloodshot eyes, as if he couldn't believe that he had been injured by Murong Qingqing. What kind of profound martial art is this? So powerful. Its offensive power increased several times, even injuring Dark Bright King, who is at the second layer of life and death chamber. It shouldn't be a profound martial art. Perhaps a secret art? Someone raised a doubt. Indeed, it's not a profound martial art, nor is it a secret art. If I'm not mistaken, this is a martial art inherited from the demons, which belongs to the demons. Demons have all kinds of martial arts, and this should be a martial art that compresses demonic power to the extreme. Everybody was shocked. Even if Dark Bright King didn't have a pseudo-supreme grade defensive artifact, he had at least a powerful half-step supreme grade one. Moreover, his cultivation base far surpassed Murong Qingqing's, having reached the second layer of life and death chamber. One could easily imagine how powerful his defense was. However, he was still injured by Murong Qingqing's hand. This demonic fist was simply too tyrannical. Murong, I'll go next. Yi Chen was quite supportive of Murong Qingqing and Dark Bright King's duel. After all, it would be hard to avoid encountering strongest half-step kings in the future. This duel would allow them to clearly witness the strength of a strongest half-step king, as well as the strength of Murong Qingqing. Now that Murong Qingqing's demonic power was exhausted and she was injured, Yi Chen naturally had to step forward. Murong Qingqing faintly nodded and retreated to Yi Chen's side. What's going on? Don't tell me she's giving up? What else can she do? Can't you see that her demonic power is exhausted? Without demonic power, anyone can kill her. You're right. Demonic power is different from Zhen Yuan, and there's basically no pill that can replenish it. This is also one of the shortcomings of the perfect demonic human bloodline. Seeing Murong Qingqing retreat, the crowd sighed inwardly. Dark Bright King was Dark Bright King after all, not someone ordinary people could deal with. Even after exhausting all means, he could only delay for a short period of time. At this moment, who among the two could stop him? That kid was probably even worse. Dark Bright King had only suffered a minor injury. He quickly flew over and coldly said, "Not bad, you actually managed to injure me at the last moment. Unfortunately, your endurance is a bit lacking. That was merely a warm-up for me." Then, let's start now. Treading on the void, Yi Chen walked out step by step, stopping 10 li away from Dark Bright King. Start? With just you? Dark Bright King laughed heartily as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. No way. Don't tell me he's even stronger than that woman? His cultivation base is only mid-half-step king realm, not even as high as mine. He probably thinks that Dark Bright King has consumed a lot of Zhen Yuan and is injured, so he wants to take turns to defeat him. Fart. This kind of injury is nothing to Dark Bright King. Although this kid's cultivation base is similar to that woman's, one has Zhen Yuan while the other has demonic power. They are simply incomparable. In terms of martial skills, demonic power fist is incomparably tyrannical. His profound martial skills are already not bad at all. Only his sword intent is a bit more powerful. Unfortunately, in a situation where the difference in willpower isn't too great, it won't be able to play a decisive role. Everybody's mouths were wide open, unable to understand where Yi Chen's confidence came from. Auntie. Yu Bingxin was a bit worried. Dark Bright King was frighteningly powerful. Murong Qingqing had exhausted all her means, yet she couldn't do anything to him. In the end, she would exhaust her demonic power and retreat. Yi Chen would be in danger. Let's watch first. Yu Lingshuang's expression was grave. If Yi Chen couldn't defeat Dark Bright King, she would have to lend a hand. Therefore, she had to grasp the perfect timing. Let me see your true strength. Among the crowd, only Huang Mei had complete confidence in Yi Chen and said inwardly. Stopping laughing, Dark Bright King licked his lips and said, "Don't think that my strength has fallen after the battle. I'm not afraid to tell you that my blood is boiling. I hope you can take one move from me. If you can't, then you can die." Bang! Black light erupted as Dark Bright King charged at Yi Chen with extreme speed, slapping out with his palm. Black Kiln Giant Palm, attack! Clang! Unsheathing the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen's figure leaned forward. With a swish, he attacked at an unimaginable timing, brushing past Dark Bright King's body. Immediately, a black crescent-shaped sword energy appeared and streaked across Dark Bright King's body. What happened next shocked everyone. In a single exchange, Dark Bright King's entire body was sent flying. The clothes on his chest were torn, and a clear sword mark was left on his semi-supreme grade armor. He spurted out a huge mouthful of blood, and his eyes almost popped out of their socket. A single sword strike had sent Dark Bright King flying. Chapter 8:11. How is this possible? Yu Lingshuang and Yu Bingxin were not the only ones shocked. Apart from Huang Mei and Murong Qingqing, everyone else was astonished to the extreme. They even wondered if they were seeing things, or if they were hallucinating. Otherwise, how could such a scene happen? Darklight King was sent flying by Yi Chen's sword. Dark Bright King's cultivation base was 3 levels higher than Yi Chen's. Yi Chen was a mid-half-step king, and above him was the high level. Then, there was the first layer of Life and Death Chamber and the second layer of Life and Death Chamber. Just the difference in cultivation base alone was enough to widen the gap between the two. Darklight King might not be able to injure Yi Chen with a single palm strike, but he should at least be evenly matched. Who could have imagined that Yi Chen would be so frightening, gaining the upper hand in a single exchange? Yi Chen indifferently smiled, but didn't pursue his opponent. When he was at peak late sea of Soul Realm, he had the strength of a strongest half-step king with the Thunder Disaster sword in hand. Now that he had reached mid-half-step king realm, even without the evil shattering sword, he was confident that he could contend against the Darklight King, who was at the second layer of Life and Death Chamber. Adding the evil shattering sword, the result could be easily imagined. As for the advantage, in terms of cultivation base, Yi Chen was indeed much weaker than Darklight King. However, one shouldn't forget that Yi Chen's profound martial skill, Waning Moon, was his trump card. No matter how powerful Darklight King's Darklight Palm arts were, they were still much weaker. In terms of will, Yi Chen's destruction sword intent had long since reached the 5th step, which was equivalent to an ordinary 6th-step sword intent. On the other hand, Darklight King's martial will was merely at the peak of the 4th step. A gap of 1.5 step in will was even harder to make up than cultivation base. In a situation where both sides had similar fighting strength, the one with the higher will would usually have the last laugh. As for the reason, it was very simple. Humans were made of flesh and blood, and after a long battle, their condition would inevitably decline. For example, their Zhen Yuan would decrease, and as long as they didn't die, their will would not fluctuate too much. It could be said that the strength of one's will determined one's potential. As expected, I've really met someone who has the chance to become a legend. Huang Mei smiled faintly. Since ancient times, there would be many unparalleled experts born in every era. However, there would only be one or two legendary figures in every era. Currently, there were no legendary figures in this era. Although those titled monarchs were strong, they were only considered as unparalleled masters and not legendary figures. However, the situation had started to change a few years ago or even 10 years ago. Countless geniuses were competing to be born, each more abnormal than the previous one, each more monstrous than the previous one. Everyone was guessing that in the next few decades, the whole of Elysium would undergo a huge change. When the geniuses gathered from the stars grew up, perhaps Elysium would reach a golden age that would not lose to the early modern age. It might even catch up to the medieval age. Huang Mei had been roaming the deep sea for many years, but Yi Chen was the first person that made her have this kind of thought. There was no other reason than that Yi Chen was too abnormal and had somewhat broken the balance. Stop! The Darklight King's Zhen Yuan erupted to the limit, and his entire body came to a halt. The void twisted under his feet. Raising his head, the Darklight King fixed his gaze on Yi Chen. In that split second, Yi Chen had only made two movements, advancing and attacking. However, these two movements had left him helpless. It was as if his every move had already been calculated by the opponent. No matter what he did, the outcome would not change. What shocked him even more was that Yi Chen's instantaneous burst of speed was even greater than Murong Qingqing's. What kind of explosive power was this? Murong Qingqing was healing her injuries while watching the battle. Yi Chen sending the Darklight King flying with a single sword strike was not out of her expectations. No one was clearer than her about how fast Yi Chen's attacking speed would be once he entered a battle state. He was like a peerless sword that would not be unsheathed, but once it was unsheathed, it would definitely injure the enemy. Very well, you're worthy of me revealing my trump card. In the battle against Murong Qingqing, the Darklight King had many trump cards that he hadn't used. Admittedly, part of this was due to the dark force field, which prevented him from engaging in close combat. However, the main reason was that he didn't want to do so. For him, although Murong Qingqing was difficult to deal with, it was not enough for him to use his trump card. Then let me experience the foundation of a strongest half-step king. Holding the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen stood in the void. His blue robes fluttered in the wind like a blue banner. The Darklight King is getting serious. The spectators who had some understanding of the Darklight King discussed in low voices. Before this, the Darklight King hadn't used any trump card. From start to finish, he had only used the first style of the Darklight palm art. It should be known that trump cards were extremely useful. In situations where the difference in strength wasn't too great, trump cards were often the deciding factor. As one's realm increased, the requirements for a trump card to be considered more and more stringent. This was especially true for some heaven-grade secret arts, which were strange and frightening existences. It was not like the spectators hadn't seen some people instantly killing others with secret arts. As the spectators discussed, the Darklight King made his move. His first move was a killing move. He soared into the sky like a great rock spreading its wings, yet also like the pressure of Mt. Tai. A boundless aura covered the sun and moon, throwing yin and yang into disorder. Watching the soaring Darklight King, everyone's heart sank. In their perception, the world had turned hazy and chaotic, as if doomsday had arrived. This is the true Darklight palm imprint. Take this. In the sky, the Darklight King's thunderous roar reverberated as his palm pressed down. The palm grew larger and larger until it finally flew out, transforming into a huge palm of scorched earth. It fiercely slammed toward Yi Chen, its surface covered in cracks and boiling magma, emitting black light smoke. His schemes are truly deep. Yi Chen sneered. If the previous Darklight palm imprint was 60 to 70% complete, then the current one was 80 to 90% complete. Looking at the scorched black palm covered in magma, it seemed no different from a real object. All of its power was contained within. However, this was still not enough. The evil shattering sword created a bright white sword flower in the air. Yi Chen waved his arm, and the sword sliced through the air. In the next second, 7 hair-thin sword chi shot out, heading toward the scorched palm at an extremely high speed without making a sound. Puff 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 puff. A shocking scene occurred. The seemingly harmless slender sword chi immediately gained the upper hand as soon as it came into contact with the scorched black palm. The 5 fingers of the scorched black palm were the first to be chopped off, leaving the palm and disappearing into dust. Then, the 6th sword chi sliced through the center of the scorched black palm, and the 7th sword chi pierced through it in one go. It was like the sun and moon had broken through, and dawn had broken through. The Darklight palm imprint had been broken. What? Before the sword chi arrived, the chilling sword intent had already assaulted Darklight King's face, causing his scalp to go numb. The sword chi was simply too fast. Because of its speed, it was unstoppable and unstoppable. At this moment, the Darklight King couldn't dodge even if he wanted to. He was sure that if he tried to dodge, he would be struck by the sword chi for sure. Seal! At this critical moment, the veins on Darklight King's forehead bulged. Vigorous Zhen Yuan erupted like a volcano, frantically strengthening his protective Zhen Yuan to resist the sword chi. Clang! In the next moment, the sword chi slashed on Darklight King's protective Zhen Yuan, creating a metallic clanging sound. A sword mark was left on the latter's protective Zhen Yuan. If the sword chi hadn't cut through the scorched black palm first, it wouldn't have been hard for it to break through the protective Zhen Yuan. Darklight King, if this is all you've got, then I'm truly disappointed. Unknowingly, Yi Chen had already arrived in front of the Darklight King. The two faced each other, one panic-stricken and the other ice-cold. Chi. Yi Chen raised his sword and stabbed at the Darklight King's protective Zhen Yuan. No! The Darklight King roared. His body spun, and one Darklight King after another appeared. Each of them was vivid and lifelike, and it was impossible to tell which one was the real one. It's the Darklight King's cicada shedding secret art. Many people exclaimed inwardly. The cicada shedding secret art was a heaven-grade high-grade secret art that was extremely difficult to cultivate. Once it was cultivated to great completion, as long as the difference in strength wasn't too great, it would be impossible for the opponent to even injure them. It was said that the Darklight King had already cultivated the cicada shedding secret art to minor completion. Experts of the same realm shouldn't even think of touching him. Once this secret art was used, Yi Chen would most likely return empty-handed. Unexpectedly, the result was completely different from what they had imagined. Yi Chen's evil vanquishing sword was like maggots on a bone. Following an unimaginable trajectory, it pierced through one Darklight King after another. In the end, the sword light flickered and disappeared. Dozens of li away, the Darklight King reappeared in a sorry state. He lowered his head, his expression extremely unsightly. There was a sword hole on his thigh, from which dark red blood seeped out and dyed his clothes red. He had already used the cicada shedding secret art, but he still couldn't escape from Yi Chen's attacks. One could imagine what realm Yi Chen's eyesight, technique, and sword speed had reached. Such a terrifying swordsman didn't only make the Darklight King feel uneasy. Everyone else was in disbelief, especially Steward He and Yu Lingshuang. One had a gloomy expression, while the other was flabbergasted. As for Yu Bingxin, she was dumbfounded. How could she know that Yi Chen's strength had reached such a terrifying level in just a few months? Shaking off the blood on the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen was somewhat astonished. The sword art he had used to break the Darklight palm and attack the Darklight King was the spiritual sword. As his strength increased, the spiritual sword had become more and more refined. Although its destructive power wasn't as great as waning moons, it was still extremely powerful. Of course, not everyone could perform the spiritual sword to its limit. Only Yi Chen, who had the soul power, could do it, because when the speed was too fast, the soul power would not be able to keep up, and the situation of losing control would occur. Unknowingly, the potential of the spiritual sword would be suppressed, and it would not be able to attack with its full power. The Dark Light King being able to dodge the spiritual sword was undoubtedly due to this secret art. It was most likely an extremely powerful one. Go! Pointing out with his left hand, Yi Chen's expression turned cold. Clang! At Yi Chen's waist, the Thunder Calamity sword unsheathed itself, and pierced toward the Dark Light King like a bolt of lightning shuttling through the void. Defensive sword art. Clang! The Dark Light King's fist blasted away the Thunder Tribulation sword, but how could the defensive sword art be so easily broken? Although Yi Chen's soul power hadn't increased much after entering the half-step king realm, it had already formed a soul membrane, greatly increasing the strength of his soul. His body swaying, the Dark Light King retreated repeatedly, unable to stop his body. 15 swords. Controlling the Thunder Disaster sword from a distance, Yi Chen pressed down with his sword finger, and the Thunder Disaster sword suddenly split into 14 Zhen Yuan flying swords. Together with the Thunder Disaster sword, they attacked the Dark Light King at the same time. The blood and qi in the Dark Light King's body boiled, and he simply couldn't find the time to adjust his condition. He could only passively defend against the flying swords, his protective Zhen Yuan becoming increasingly thinner. He's even proficient in the lost defensive sword art. Who the hell is he? The Dark Light King is actually being suppressed. Moreover, it's an absolute suppression. Yi Chen's strength piqued everyone's interest. Young Master Yi is going to win, Yu Bingxin happily said. I'm afraid it won't be that simple. Yu Lingshuang's brows slightly creased. Dark Light King, what are you waiting for? Don't tell me you can't kill him. Right at this moment, the head steward sent a Zhen Yuan transmission to the Dark Light King. Chapter 8:12. You think this kid is easy to deal with? Dark Light King frantically defended against the flying swords while furiously sending a Zhen Yuan transmission back. It had to be said that the second layer of Life and Death Challenge was indeed the second layer of Life and Death Challenge. His protective Zhen Yuan was exceptionally strong. Even if he missed 1 or 2 Zhen Yuan flying swords, they wouldn't be able to injure him for the time being, unless the real body of the Thunder Disaster sword arrived. However, Dark Light King was no fool. How could he allow the Thunder Disaster sword to approach him? You, Dark Light King, have shaken Gemstone Islands for decades. You must have a lot of trump cards. Otherwise, you would have been replaced long ago. The head steward seemed confident that Dark Light King could make a comeback. Humph. Seems like you've studied me quite well. Dark Light King coldly snorted, not bothering to explain. Ding 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 ding, 15 flying swords crazily attacked Dark Light King, especially the true body of the Thunder Disaster sword. Each strike was like a thunderbolt, splashing sparks everywhere. Black Star Explosion. Defending for a long time would lead to a loss. Dark Light King naturally understood this principle. After knocking away the true body of the Thunder Disaster sword, he roared and suddenly curled up his body. As his body curled up, a blazing black radiance erupted and condensed outside his body in 1/100th of a second. In the next moment, the Dark Light King was enveloped by a 2-meter-wide scorched earth ball. The surface of the earth ball was shockingly hot, and its hardness was unimaginable. The Zhen Yuan flying swords could only create sparks and shallow scratches on its surface. Explode! A deep roar came from inside the earthen ball. Rumble! The scorched earth ball was like a small star as it exploded with a loud rumble. A powerful impact swept out in all directions, not only destroying Yi Chen's defensive sword art, but also breaking the tip of the Thunder Disaster sword. As for the other Zhen Yuan flying swords, they had long since been annihilated, no longer existing. Rip! A beam of blue cold light shot towards him. Yi Chen reached out 2 fingers and caught it. It was the tip of the Thunder Disaster Sword. Fusion of fire and earth profound. Yi Chen's eyesight was extremely sharp, and he could tell that Darklight King's Black Star explosion was a move created from the explosion of stars. In Elysium, life and death realm experts could roam the starry sky and descend upon beautiful stars. Some of these stars were very small, and life and death kings could easily destroy them. However, when a small star exploded, ordinary life and death kings would retreat 3 feet, fearing that they would be caught in the center of the explosion. Although Darklight King's Black Star explosion was crude, it was undoubtedly frightening to experts of the same level. After breaking Yi Chen's Imperial Sword Art, the Darklight King's aura rose again and again. A flickering black radiance surged around his body like a black flame. "You are the first and last person to force me to this extent." The Darklight King's voice rumbled like thunder. The violent sound waves raised towering waves with a shocking momentum. "Really?" Yi Chen's complexion didn't change as he flung the Thunder Disaster Sword's tip. "I didn't intend to reveal too many of my trump cards, but you've made me make an exception. So die." Darklight Palm Art's second style, Blazing Earth. His whole body soared into the sky, and his right hand was scorched black as he pushed it toward Yi Chen. Rumble. Black light and scarlet flame light interweaved together like a volcanic eruption, as if the Earth's crust had cracked open. The space Yi Chen was in was completely submerged. From the outside, it was impossible to see Yi Chen's figure. What was going on? "Look, the Yuan Qi there is exploding." A person pointed at the submerged sky and said with a dumbstruck expression. Everyone looked over and sucked in a breath of cold air. Black and red intertwined in the sky. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Wind and rain intertwined. Waves of fire soared into the sky. They were accompanied by beams of intense light. Purple, white, green, black, everything was there. It was unknown how many colors and how many kinds of Yuan Qi they contained. How can he survive like this? Nobody could imagine that the Darklight King's strength had reached such a level. A single palm strike had detonated a large area. "I'm afraid this kid is done for." Someone sighed. "Yeah, he's already strong enough. If the Darklight King doesn't reveal his trump cards, he won't be able to beat him. But he's still young and doesn't have a deep foundation. How can he compare to a 100-year-old strongest half-step king like the Darklight King? Any one of his trump cards would be enough to dissolve his advantage and turn the tables." "Auntie." Yu Bingxin became anxious upon seeing the situation. Yu Lingshuang squinted her eyes and said solemnly, "I can feel that his aura hasn't disappeared. Moreover, it's getting stronger." "Aura getting stronger? Could it be that young Master Yi is preparing for a counterattack?" Yu Lingshuang's words made Yu Bingxin sigh in relief. Perhaps. Yu Lingshuang didn't know either. Break. Yi Chen's voice was like a thunderclap from the 9 heavens. Nothing could isolate or weaken it. Following this shout, the sky that had been submerged started to churn violently, and the 5-colored radiance clapped against each other. It was as if the sky had truly turned into an ocean wave, a wave made of countless energies. Rip! In the next moment, a black sword light shot out, tearing apart the energy waves and tearing open a huge gap. Yi Chen's figure shot out from the gap and launched 49 sword strikes at the Darklight King. Each sword strike was fast to the extreme. Golden cicada shedding. The Darklight King's expression turned gloomy. His body repeatedly turned, leaving behind vivid images. After 49 images, he suddenly pounced at Yi Chen. Along the way, he launched dozens of Darklight Palm imprints. At this moment, he was prepared to go all out. Yi Chen's strength had far surpassed his expectations. He could actually break through his blazing earth and instantly counterattack. Because the distance was too far, Yi Chen's spiritual sword couldn't injure the Darklight King. However, it cleanly destroyed the latter's images. After 49 strikes, Yi Chen's aura turned sluggish. This was a sign that he had exhausted all his strength. Right at this moment, the Dark Light King pounced at him. Even if his timing wasn't as good as Yi Chen's, it was still extremely frightening. He was worthy of being a veteran's strongest half-step king. Unfortunately, his opponent was Yi Chen, who had never been defeated in a battle of the same level as Yi Chen. Sword steps. Like a sword light, Yi Chen shuttled back and forth among the countless scorched palm imprints. His speed was like a flickering shadow, like a ray of sunlight. The Dark Light King only saw a blur before Yi Chen arrived before him. As for his palm imprints, they were completely ineffective. How can he be so fast? The Dark Light King's face turned pale with fright. In their first exchange, he had already sensed that Yi Chen's explosive power was very powerful. However, this time, the latter was much faster and craftier. Rather than calling it a movement art, it would be better to call it a sword art that used one's body as a sword. What the Dark Light King didn't know was that Yi Chen's sword steps was a sword art intent. Sword arts were naturally extremely fast, and their trajectories were ever-changing. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that even Murong Qingqing, with her innate speed, was inferior to Yi Chen in short-range bursts. In fact, Yi Chen could be even faster. His Green Lotus sword arts had already been upgraded to a heaven-grade cultivation technique, which provided an inconceivable boost to his sword step. After all, one was a sword artist's cultivation technique, while the other was a sword artist's sword steps. The two naturally complemented each other. As soon as he arrived, Yi Chen waved his sword at the Dark Light King. This sword emitted a black sword chi that slashed at the Dark Light King. The Dark Light King's reaction was half a beat slower, but in this life and death crisis, he subconsciously used Cicada Shedding Carapace, using his image to block Yi Chen's sword while his real body darted to the right. As a wily old fox, he didn't forget to turn around and launch an attack to prevent Yi Chen from approaching. Truly a wily old fox. Yi Chen didn't show any mercy. Up until now, apart from bewitching mirror shattering and sword domain, he had used almost all of his strength. If it were another strongest half-step king who had just stepped into the second layer of life and death chamber, they would have long since been defeated or even killed. However, the Dark Light King was different. Not only was his cultivation base profound, but he also had countless trump cards, especially the Cicada Shedding Carapace, which allowed him to evade Yi Chen's sure-kill attacks several times. Therefore, even if Yi Chen held the upper hand, he couldn't deal any substantial damage to the Dark Light King. As for why he didn't use Bewitching Mirror Shattering and Sword Domain, Yi Chen had the same thought as the Dark Light King. With so many people present, revealing his trump cards was an extremely unwise choice. Bewitching Mirror Shattering contained space profound, while Sword Domain was a sword artist's domain. Neither could be casually used, unless no one was present or there was no other choice. However, I've already seen through the secret of Cicada Shedding Carapace. After tangling for so long, Yi Chen had finally seen through the weakness of Cicada Shedding Carapace, or rather, the weakness of Dark Light King's Golden Dynasty Shedding Carapace. This time, the Dark Light King couldn't escape this calamity. Damn it! Do I have to use the third style of Dark Light Palm Arts? Pulling open the distance, the Dark Light King revealed a hesitant expression. Although he could summon the wind and summon the rain in Gemstone Islands, this was because he had never revealed his strongest trump cards. Others couldn't see through him, but once he did, he would lose all his secrets. This was an extremely dangerous situation. In a confrontation between experts, strength was not the most important factor, but the element of surprise. In Gemstone Islands, there were two strongest half-step kings. One was him, and the other was Huang Mei. He was sure that once he used the third style of Dark Light Palm Arts, Huang Mei would study it for a long time. The next time he fought with her, he would undoubtedly suffer a great loss. Forget it, if I don't use the third style, I can't take down this kid today. Future matters can be left for later. His mind turning at lightning speed, The Dark Light King quickly made up his mind. With this palm, you'll die without a doubt. Coldly looking at Yi Chen, the Dark Light King seemed as if he was looking at a dead man. He had no doubt that Yi Chen would die under this palm without any suspense. This was because even he himself hadn't fully grasped this palm. Once he used it, he couldn't control it and could only allow it to continue. Bring it on. Yi Chen was somewhat flabbergasted. Dark Light King's expression told him that the opponent's next move would be no small matter. However, he didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. On the contrary, he was somewhat expectant. He wanted to see just how profound Dark Light King's ultimate trump card was. One had to know that apart from bewitching mirror shattering and sword domain, he hadn't used Waning Moon to its full power. This was because the evil shattering sword consumed too much Jin Yuan. Apart from spiritual sword, all of his other moves would consume at least 10 to 20% of his Jin Yuan. He couldn't use them more than a few times. Letting out a breath, the steward revealed a smile and said in a relaxed tone, "It's over." "Steward, how did you know?" a half-step king of glorious exchanges asked. The steward said mysteriously, "Just wait and see. This kid's chance of survival is 0. Buzz. The Silver Moon Arctic Fox Phantom appeared behind Yu Lingshuang. She could sense that Yi Chen was truly in danger this time. His life might be in danger, and if she didn't make preparations, she wouldn't be able to save him in time. That old geezer even created the third style. Huang Mei's brows creased. The last time she exchanged blows with the Dark Light King was 10 years ago. At that time, he had only created 2 styles, and the third was Distant Shadow. Chapter 8:13. Unknowingly, the wind had calmed down, and the clouds in the sky had stopped moving as if frozen, turning into a landscape painting. As for the ocean waves below, when they reached several hundred meters in the air, they also froze, leaving little sprays floating on their tip. The heaven and earth were silent and all creations were still. The Dark Light King's eyes shot out a black beam, devoid of any emotion. The space distorted as he leaped up. As he rose, his aura also soared, filling the air with a world-destroying aura. Burning sky annihilation. The aura eventually reached its limit. When it reached its limit, the Dark Light King made his move. Placing his left hand on his right arm, he spread open his right palm and fiercely slapped toward Yi Chen, who was dozens of li away. This palm directly locked onto the sky where Yi Chen was. Yi Chen shockingly discovered that the surrounding space was rapidly warping. Not to mention dodging, he couldn't even move forward. The Dark Light King's burning sky annihilation had already reached the point of shattering the void. Although it didn't contain the space profound, its destructive power was frightening. Pung 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 pung. Something even more frightening happened. Countless fireballs of different sizes appeared in the space. The smallest was only the size of a fist and had a deep red color, while the biggest was the size of a house. Hundreds upon thousands of fireballs revolved around Yi Chen and exploded. Being at the center of the explosion, Yi Chen could feel that even the smallest fireball had the destructive power to heavily injure ordinary Sea of Soul Realm experts. The largest fireball could even force a half-step king to retreat. Hundreds upon thousands of fireballs exploded simultaneously, their power stacking together. Perhaps no one under life and death realm would be able to withstand it, not even Yi Chen. It was hard to imagine how the Dark Light King had created such a powerful move. Unfortunately, great might didn't mean great moves. Burning Sky Annihilation's accumulation time was too long. No one would foolishly stay where they were and let it hit them. Using the sword steps, Yi Chen flickered out just before the fireball exploded. Pung, 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 some of the fire waves struck Yi Chen's body, but they were easily deflected by Yi Chen. When the fire waves overlapped with each other and couldn't be deflected, Yi Chen casually slashed out a path. The Dark Light King's mouth curved into a cruel smile as he clenched his right hand and shouted, "Destroy!" Roar. A dragon's roar resounded. The waves of fire formed by the explosion of the fireballs rapidly gathered together, forming a black-red fire dragon that could burn the heavens and earth. The fire dragon raised its head to the sky and roared, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The scorching heat caused the surrounding several miles to turn into a vacuum. With a flash of red light, the fire dragon quickly swam towards Yi Chen. In the eyes of the crowd, the fire dragon didn't seem to be very fast, but it caught up in a few breaths. Break! Up until now, Yi Chen had only used the evil vanquishing sword with his full strength once, and that was when he broke Darklight King's ultimate move, Blazing Earth. Other times, Yi Chen could only use 50% of the sword's power. It wasn't that he didn't want to go all out, but the sword consumed too much Jin Yuan. With the amount of Jin Yuan he could only use it 5 times. It was precisely because the evil shattering sword consumed a lot of Jin Yuan that it was exceptionally powerful. This time, Yi Chen did not use any of his ultimate attacks. Instead, he used the gold pattern that he had long since retreated to the second line. Buzz! The dark gold pattern spread out, cutting off the head of the fire dragon directly, causing sparks to fly everywhere. You think it's over just like that? Darklight King sneered. Boundless Jin Yuan rushed out and gathered on the fire dragon. With a pop, the fire dragon grew a new head and opened its mouth, biting towards Yi Chen's body. Waning moon. Yi Chen's expression remained unchanged as he waved the evil vanquishing sword in the air. Immediately, a black crescent-shaped sword energy swept through the fire dragon's body like a waning moon descending upon the world. Crack! Crackle! No matter how powerful the fire dragon was, it still couldn't escape its fate of being crushed. The evil vanquishing sword's full power combined with the waning moon, which was second only to bewitching mirror shattering, had a destructive power that even Yi Chen couldn't estimate. Impossible! Darklight King's eyes were wide open. He was the clearest about the burning sky annihilation's might, and yet, Yi Chen had broken it so easily. This was a devastating blow to him. At this moment, his battle intent was rapidly declining. There was only one thought in his mind: where there's life, there's hope. Run! Darklight King's figure flickered as he shot out. With a light snort, Yi Chen's left finger moved, and the broken blood sword came out of its sheath. It chased after Darklight King at an extreme speed and fiercely slashed at his protective Jin Yuan. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere as a clear sword mark was left on the Darklight King's protective Jin Yuan. At the same time, he himself was sent flying by the enormous power of the broken blood sword, unable to control his body. Sword light streaked across the sky as Yi Chen instantly appeared near Darklight King, thrusting his sword at the air. You want to kill me? Dream on! Darklight King roared and once again used the heaven-grade high-grade secret art, Cicada Shedding. This secret art had helped him escape death countless times, and this time was no exception. However, Yi Chen was already waiting for him. Flipping the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen's wrist shook. With a speed that even soul power couldn't capture, the sword pierced through the Darklight King's protective Jin Yuan and landed on his throat. Shortly after, it came out from the back of his neck, bringing with it a wisp of dark red blood. Beside him was a lifelike image. Following the blazing world and burning sky annihilation, Darklight King's cicada shedding carapace was also broken. However, unlike the previous 2 times, he had lost his life this time. One slash to the throat. Everyone's eyes froze, including Yu Lingshuang. They didn't expect the Darklight King's death to come so quickly. In the previous times, Yi Chen was clearly helpless against the Darklight King's cicada shedding carapace. But this time, the Darklight King didn't even have the chance to escape and was instantly killed by Yi Chen. The Darklight King was still alive. His gaze fell on the evil vanquishing sword that had pierced through his throat. He wanted to say something, but nothing came out. His voice was muffled by the evil vanquishing carapace, just like how his throat had been pierced by the sword. Blood spurting out unceasingly, The Dark Light King used the last of his strength to send a spiritual message to Yi Chen. Why? How could you break my cicada shedding carapace? Since the person was already dead, Yi Chen didn't need to let him die with grievances. He replied, Cicada shedding carapace has an extremely powerful confusion property, but it's not worth mentioning to me. You were able to escape the previous times because cicada shedding carapace was fast enough to surpass my sword art. As long as my first attack landed, none of the following attacks would be able to kill you. Therefore, the first attack was merely a feint. The real killing move is the second one, which is this one. So that's how it is. The Dark Light King understood. His gloomy eyes were filled with regret and unwillingness. All sorts of emotions gathered at this moment. The Dark Light King understood, but the others might not. What the hell happened? How did this kid break Dark Light King's cicada shedding carapace? That sword wasn't that much faster than the previous ones. Could it be that the Dark Light King was gravely injured and his condition has deteriorated? That's why cicada shedding carapace has a weakness? Although I don't know what happened, I can be sure that the problem lies with this kid and not the Dark Light King. How frightening! First, he broke Dark Light King's blazing earth and burning sky annihilation, and now he broke cicada shedding carapace. There's nothing more despairing than this. Having one's life-saving trump card destroyed was a cruel blow to anyone. Impossible, absolutely impossible. How could this happen? The one who couldn't accept it the most was none other than the steward of the glorious exchanges. He was one of the few who had witnessed the might of burning sky annihilation. Thus, he was certain that the Dark Light King would be able to kill Yi Chen. Apart from him, cicada shedding carapace had never been broken before. Knowing the Dark Light King's background, he couldn't accept the fact that Yi Chen had killed the Dark Light King in one strike. He couldn't understand how Yi Chen would emerge victorious with such a huge disparity in cultivation base. Nothing could be more absurd and subversive than this. He had brought 4 half-step kings this time to prevent others from interfering. As long as the Dark Light King killed Yi Chen, he could entice the latter with generous conditions and obtain the sword-forging art jade strip originally belonging to Yi Chen. As long as he brought it back, he would certainly receive a reward. However, the result was completely different from what he had imagined. He actually broke cicada shedding carapace. I'm afraid only he can do so. Huang Mei was one of the few who knew how Yi Chen had broken cicada shedding carapace. However, one had to be fast enough in order to break cicada shedding carapace. A sword artist's sword arts had always been fast, and Yi Chen was a peak sword artist. Therefore, even if he could break it, others might not necessarily be able to. There's still one more year before the decennial event. He should be participating. Huang Mei said inwardly. Huff. Slowly letting out a breath, the Silver Moon Arctic Fox phantom behind Yu Lingshuang gradually dimmed and retracted. She sighed, indeed, there's always someone better. Although I'm a rare genius of the Silver Moon Arctic Fox clan, Elysium has too many peerless geniuses. This one before me is enough to shock the world. Yu Lingshuang was not very old, only in her 30s. With his throat pierced, the Dark Light King slowly closed his eyes. His life aura also became faintly discernible. Abruptly, the Dark Light King opened his eyes, which were brimming with boundless hatred and madness. If I die, let's all die together. Forcefully speaking caused a hole to appear in the Dark Light King's throat. His voice, under the vibrations of Zhen Yuan, was distorted and malicious. In almost an instant, the Dark Light King's body swelled up. A flickering black radiance illuminated his skin, revealing his internal organs. Looking down, one could see a lump of black radiance revolving and expanding in his dantian. At the same time, a crack had appeared on the Dark Light King's forehead, and his martial will was dispersing. In the face of death, the Dark Light King activated a secret art, intending to self-detonate his body and sea of soul. The self-detonation of a strongest half-step king at the second layer of life and death chamber, moreover, it was a double detonation. One could easily imagine how powerful it would be. Even a strongest half-step king would be doomed if caught in it. Damn it! Everyone was indescribably horrified and frantically fled. They were only a few dozen li away from the two. This distance was not enough to resist the double detonation of a strongest half-step king. Perhaps even 100 li was not safe. The further they fled, the better. Self-detonation. Yi Chen's brows creased. He was the closest to the Dark Light King. If the latter self-detonated, he wouldn't be able to escape. Haha, so what if you beat me? You'll still die. The Dark Light King was incomparably happy, and his smile was distorted. You'll have to ask me first if you want to self-detonate. Yi Chen's expression turned solemn. His forehead suddenly split open, and a silver radiance surged out. Chapter 8:14. What is this? A third eye? Darklight King had a bad premonition. The crack on Yi Chen's forehead was like a silver vertical eye. It didn't have a pupil, but he could feel that the power of the vertical eye had already penetrated through his forehead and into his sea of soul. A majestic soul pressure was firmly locking onto him. Puff! A silver beam shot out from Yi Chen's vertical eye and drilled into Darklight King's sea of soul. Darklight King's sea of soul was on the verge of collapse, but as soon as the silver beam entered, his sea of soul was pierced through, and his remnant consciousness was annihilated. With the crisis of sea of soul self-destruction resolved, Darklight King's remnant consciousness disappeared. The Zhen Yuan within his body hadn't been brewed to the most crucial point before self-destruction. With a bang, Darklight King's body turned into ashes, and a black radiance burst out, turning into a black fireball several li in size. Yi Chen's figure was instantly devoured by the black fireball. Yi Chen. Murong Qingcheng was anxious. She was the only one who hadn't left the area. Don't worry, I'm fine. Suddenly, Yi Chen's voice entered Murong Qingcheng's ears. At the center of the black fireball was a bronze protective Zhen Yuan, firmly protecting Yi Chen's body. The black radiance could only create ripples on its surface, unable to shake it in the slightest. As the energy dissipated, Yi Chen's figure gradually became clear. Fortunately, he didn't succeed in double self-destruction. Otherwise, even if I wore bronze armor, I would have been blown into meat paste. Yi Chen's spirit was somewhat dispirited, and his face was filled with exhaustion. Double self-detonation was an extremely frightening, indiscriminate destruction art. If Darklight King succeeded, his berserk Zhen Yuan and martial will would explode. Not to mention Yi Chen, anyone under life and death realm wouldn't be able to withstand it. They would lose control of their own life and death. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Yi Chen used his special ability, the Soul Eye. In the early stages, the Soul Eye could only be used to observe things in a large area. But, as his cultivation increased, and he was now a half-step king warrior, the Soul Eye had evolved into the Soul Light. Soul Light was, in fact, the manifestation of a highly concentrated soul power, possessing an extremely powerful soul attack effect. Under the attack of Yi Chen's Soul Light, the Darklight King's Sea of Soul was pierced, and his consciousness dissipated along with it. Not only that, the Zhen Yuan within his body went berserk without the Darklight King's control. It didn't reach its peak, and was merely equivalent to the most ordinary Zhen Yuan explosion of a half-step king. It couldn't do anything to Yi Chen, who was clad in bronze armor. Otherwise, the Darklight King's self-destruction would have been enough to cripple Yi Chen even if he didn't die. It was extremely dangerous. However, after using the Soul Light for the first time, Yi Chen was not completely unscathed. His soul power had been reduced by more than half. If he wanted to recover to his peak, he would need at least a couple of months. During this period of time, although his battling power would not be affected, it would be impossible for him to use the Soul Light again. Otherwise, his soul power would be completely used up, and that would be very dangerous. This was also the reason why Yi Chen's spirit was somewhat dispirited. The self-destruction is so weak. The fleeing crowd stopped one after another. The Darklight King's double self-destruction was too weak, and the shockwaves couldn't have reached this far. It should have been several dozen li at most. No, it doesn't contain any martial will. Someone reacted. Now that you mention it, it's true. Could this kid have used some method to stop Darklight King's Sea of Soul explosion? Because everyone was busy fleeing, they didn't notice what had happened. Therefore, none of them saw Yi Chen use soul light, and could only guess. To be able to stop even the double self-destruction. Bingxin, you don't need to worry about your benefactor anymore. With his strength, those under life and death realm that can threaten him are few and far between. Although Yu Lingshuang didn't flee, she still retreated several dozen li. She couldn't stop the Darklight King's double self-destruction, nor did she have the time to save Yi Chen. The only thing she could do was retreat. Yu Bingxin asked, "Auntie, do you think young Master Yi has the qualifications to enter the life and death substitute list?" Yu Lingshuang stared blankly for a moment before replying, "It's very difficult. The life and death substitute list only records geniuses under the age of 50, and there are only 36 of them. One can well imagine the difficulty of entering it. After all, Elysium is too big, and there are too many geniuses. Moreover, this life and death substitute list doesn't only include humans, but also demonic beasts, sea beasts, half-beasts, demonic humans, and other races. Choosing 36 life and death substitute list from all these races, one can well imagine the difficulty. But I feel that young Master Yi is very strong. Who knows, this might not be his strongest strength." Yu Bingxin had a new understanding of Yi Chen. Therefore, she was certain that he was unfathomable. The Darklight King is not a world-shaking genius. Therefore, even though he has reached the second layer of life and death chamber, he still lost to your benefactor. As for the life and death substitute list, each and every one of them is a peerless genius. They are all experts who can battle above their realm. I've seen a mid-half-step king who defeated a life and death substitute list's second layer life and death chamber. He was only ranked in the 20s. As for the top 10, their cultivation bases are all at the first layer or higher. After several years, there might even be some at the peak of the third layer. Yu Lingshuang didn't deny Yi Chen. If the scene just now had happened a few years ago, she would have also felt that Yi Chen could enter the life and death substitute list. But now it was a bit uncertain. After all, they were all world-shaking geniuses. If one could battle above their realm, so could she. At this moment, what mattered was cultivation base. Is that so? Yu Bingxin didn't expect that entering the life and death substitute list would be so difficult. Let's go. Seeing Yi Chen kill the Darklight King, Manager He's eyes flickered several times. In the end, he still left with his people. With their strength, they simply couldn't defeat Yi Chen. As the 5 left, the others also left, leaving only Huang Mei, Yu Lingshuang, and Yu Bingxin. Hee, after defeating the Darklight King, you're now a strongest half-step king. Huang Mei walked over and said with a beaming smile. Shaking off the bloodstains on the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen indifferently smiled. It's just an empty title. After killing the Darklight King, he indeed had the qualifications to be called a strongest half-step king. However, it was only in Gemstone Islands that he could be considered a strongest half-step king. After all, who knew how many realms one could battle above one's realm? Therefore, a strongest half-step king's cultivation base was at least at the first layer of life and death chamber. Young Master Yi, Yu Bingxin and Yu Lingshuang also walked over. Yi Chen said apologetically, "I'm sorry. I left in a hurry and forgot to greet you." "It's fine." Yu Bingxin smiled. "Is young Master Yi really not going to Moonlight Island as a guest?" She then looked at Yi Chen with a hopeful gaze. "Let's talk about it later." Moonlight Island was overseen by a life and death king, and Yi Chen wasn't used to visiting someone else's headquarters. Chapter 8:15. All good things must come to an end. After parting ways with Huang Meiyue, Yu Bingxin, and Yu Lingshuang, Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing flew southward, quickly disappearing into the horizon. Richlight Ocean Span was incomparably vast. The two flew on the flying puppet for 5 days, but they still couldn't leave this ocean span. Eventually, the two landed on a volcanic island. The island was rhomboid in shape, with a total of 11 volcanoes, 2 big and 9 small. The volcanoes were as tall as cones, and their craters flickered with red light as if they could erupt at any time. We're still hundreds of millions of miles away from our destination. There's no rush. We can cultivate here for a period of time. I also want to learn the art of forging swords. If a swordsman knew how to forge swords, he would have a deeper understanding of the sword Tao. My comprehension of martial arts is a bit low. Murong Qingqing nodded. Her foundation was much higher than Yi Chen's, but her martial arts couldn't keep up with her cultivation base. If her martial arts could reach a higher realm, even the Darklight King might not be her opponent. After all, demonic power was a higher energy than Jin Yuan. Just like that, the two settled down on the volcanic island, one cultivating martial arts and the other learning sword forging. The process of sword forging wasn't very complicated, but it required a lot of patience. This was something Yi Chen didn't lack. On the contrary, he was quite outstanding. Time flew, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In these 3 days, Yi Chen had finally mastered the technique of low-rank sword forging, and had successfully created a real low-rank great sword. This low-grade sword was very ordinary, even a bit crude. In terms of quality, it could only be considered as a low-grade sword. However, this had a great significance for Yi Chen, because he had taken the first step in sword forging, which was also the most important step. There were a lot of low-grade metals in his storage ring, more than 10,000 of them. After his first success, Yi Chen wasted no time in forging the second, third, and even more low-grade sword. He wasn't in a hurry to forge mid-grade swords. No matter what, one had to have a good foundation. Without a good foundation, problems would inevitably arise in the future. This was the principle of sharpening a knife to cut firewood. Inside the huge volcano was a magma lake. Next to the lake, a blue-robed youngster was hammering a sword. Dang 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 dang. The hammer was a professional low-grade hammer. By pouring a trace of true essence into it, it would have more power and could easily change the subtle shape of the sword. There were rows of swords hanging on the walls of the volcano. They were all low-grade swords. These low-grade swords emitted different colors of light. There were red, blue, green, purple, black, yellow, and there were also clouds and mist lingering around them, or water vapor filling the air. The attributes of the swords were related to the materials used to forge them. Some metals were of the fire attribute, so the resulting swords would be of the fire attribute. Some metals were of the wind attribute, so the resulting swords would naturally be of the wind attribute. Apart from this, one could also mix some other things into the metal, such as fire cloud stone, thunder brilliant stone, and other gems that contained attribute energy. A graceful figure descended from the volcano's crater. It was Murong Qingqing. She didn't disturb Yi Chen, but walked to the wall of the volcano where the swords were hanging. So many have been forged in the past few days? Murong Qingqing was somewhat astonished. Yi Chen's forging speed was getting faster and faster. In the beginning, it would take him 3 days to forge the first sword. Then, the time rapidly shortened. Now, he had forged dozens of swords in a few days. Of course, this was also related to Yi Chen's status as a half-step king. Ordinary martial artists would take several months or even a year to forge swords. Taking out a fire attribute low-grade sword, Murong Qingqing casually waved it. The quality has also improved. This sword is almost at the level of an ordinary low-grade treasure sword. This one is already at the middle grade. Ordinary. Ordinary. Medium. Among the 100 low-grade swords, the majority were ordinary, and only 3 were medium. Try this one. At this moment, Yi Chen walked over and handed the low-grade sword to Murong Qingqing. Its thunder attribute. Receiving the sword, Murong Qingqing could feel the thunder power within. Not bad. Perhaps it's because my achievements in Thunder Profound and Metal Profound are quite high, so forging Thunder and Metal attribute low-grade swords is quite easy. Moreover, I have a new idea for this one. It should give you a fright. Yi Chen smiled. Is that so? Murong Qingqing didn't dare to pour too much demonic power into the sword, fearing that it would break. Qi. Strands of demonic power poured into the sword and blossomed with black lightning. With a light wave of Murong Qingqing, a huge rock beside the lava lake was split into 2 halves. Destruction Sword Qi. Murong Qingqing finally understood why Yi Chen said it could give her a fright. A mere low-grade sword could actually release Destruction Sword Qi. The Destruction Sword Qi contained Destruction Sword Intent, which was more than twice as powerful as ordinary sword Qi. Hee, what do you think? Yi Chen was very happy. He found that forging swords was very enjoyable, and he could obtain some benefits from it. Murong Qingqing's eyes lit up as she said, "This low-grade Thunder attribute sword is still medium-grade, but with the Destruction Sword Qi, even high-grade low-grade swords are far inferior to it. If it is given to a sect or family's disciple, their strength will increase by many folds." Yi Chen nodded. You think the same as me. The art of forging swords is very important to a sect, and the swords forged by me are even more valuable. Although the low-grade sword was useless to Yi Chen, it was very important to the disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School or the Yi family. After all, they were not powerful enough to carry a mid-grade sword or even a high-grade sword everywhere. Not to mention whether or not they could unleash the full power of the sword, just having a treasure like this would cause them to die without a burial place. Therefore, one's strength could only be matched with their own sword. Murong Qingqing smiled and said, "My Murong family also has many disciples who use swords. When the time comes, you have to give me some." How could the low-grade sword she bought be compared to the destruction sword forged by Yi Chen? "Don't worry, I have a lot of materials." Yi Chen's tone changed as he said, "Moreover, I plan to merge the Immortal Sword Intent into the sword as well. You should know how powerful it is." That's right, the Immortal Sword Intent is your fundamental sword intent. How could Murong Qingqing not know how powerful the Immortal Sword Intent was? The Immortal Sword Intent left behind by the Battle King in the natural Moat Gorge had only dissipated after 500 years. If the Immortal Sword Intent was merged into a low-grade sword, apart from making the sword Qi more powerful, it would also make the sword harder. Although it might not surpass the Destruction Sword Intent in terms of power, it would be more powerful when it came to forging sword. After chatting with Yi Chen for a while, Murong Qingqing left the volcano and continued to study martial arts, while Yi Chen devoted himself to forging sword. In a flash, 1 month had passed. Within a month, Yi Chen had forged more than 700 low-grade sword. His forging skills had increased by several times. Even if he occasionally made mistakes, the low-grade swords he forged were at least mid-grade. Normally, he could forge high-grade low-grade sword. As for Thunder and Metal attribute low-grade swords, Yi Chen could already forge them into super-grade swords, which could be said to be a major breakthrough. Swoosh! Holding the newly forged sword in his hand, Yi Chen slashed at the magma lake in front of him. The fierce sword Qi tore open a huge ravine on the surface of the magma lake as the sword Qi pervaded the air. This power is much more powerful than ordinary mid-grade sword. Yi Chen's face was full of smiles. He could imagine how powerful the disciples of the Yi clan or the Sky Cloud Martial School would be if they held the low-grade swords he forged. Flowers in a greenhouse would never know how to be tough. Just like Yi Chen, if he had not been through a lot of danger, he would not have been able to grow to where he was now. Therefore, having a great sword would be their fortune. My low-grade sword forging technique's foundation is already very solid, but it's still far from my goal. When the swords I forge are all super-grade low-grade swords, I'll use the low-grade sword forging technique to the point of perfection. Then, I'll start researching the mid-grade sword forging technique. Actually, Yi Chen could already forge mid-grade swords, but he wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to reach the peak of the low-grade sword forging technique, and then reach the same level of the mid-grade sword forging technique. Only then would he have some confidence in forging supreme-grade swords in the future. Otherwise, wouldn't it mean that anyone who had learned the sword forging technique would be able to forge supreme-grade swords? It was far from that simple. Even Yi Chen wasn't confident that he could reach that far in the sword forging technique. In the next half a month, Yi Chen's progress was even faster. Not only were all the low-grade swords he forged supreme-grade swords, but he also forged more than the previous month, reaching more than 900 swords. Half of them contained the destruction sword Qi, while the other half contained the immortal sword Qi. In fact, if there were any sword forging masters here, they would be dumbfounded by Yi Chen's achievements. Forging 1,600 and 700 low-grade swords in 1.5 months. Even a half-step king couldn't be this exaggerated. For ordinary half-step kings, it would be pretty good if they could have a third of Yi Chen's achievements. Moreover, it was impossible to forge all of them into supreme-grade low-grade swords. This was already a legendary low-grade sword forging master. Only the heavens knew how high Yi Chen's talent in sword forging was. Yi Chen also vaguely knew that his achievements in this 1.5 months were somewhat exaggerated. After pondering for a long time, he concluded that it was related to his own experiences. Battle King, Iron Sword King, Dual Sword King, Immortal Sword Intent, Destruction Sword Intent, and Slaughter Sword Intent. With the 3 great sword intents gathered in one body, he had a unique advantage in sword forging. He could always add some of his own creativity into the process. This was the reason why he could reach this level. If it were another sword Dao genius not inferior to Yi Chen, they wouldn't be able to reach this step, because it was simply unimaginable. Of course, forging 1,600 and 700 swords in 1.5 months was mainly because the grade of the swords was too low. If it were a mid-grade sword, it would probably shrink by several times. Upper-grade swords would shrink by several times again, and the same was true for semi-extreme grade swords. For extreme-grade swords, forging one in a few months was already pretty good, provided that they could be forged. In the first half-month, he had forged 900 low-grade swords. In the second half, Yi Chen had forged 1,200 low-grade swords. In total, he had forged nearly 3,000 swords. I've used up all the low-grade materials. 2,888 swords, not bad. Looking at the densely packed low-grade swords on the volcano's walls, Yi Chen let out a breath. Learning sword forging could be said to be a money-burning profession. 10,000 sets of low-grade materials had cost him tens of millions of low-grade spirit stones, which was around 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones. How could ordinary low-grade sects have so many spirit stones to spend? Therefore, even if low-grade sects had forging knowledge, the low-grade blacksmiths they nurtured could only forge mid-low-grade artifacts, which was far from Yi Chen's level. Chapter 8:16. Finally, I can forge a mid-grade sword. Right now, Yi Chen could forge a supreme low-grade sword with his eyes closed. Even if he couldn't say that he had reached the pinnacle of the sword forging art, he was at least at the point of perfection and could casually make one. After preparing the mid-grade materials, Yi Chen immediately began forging. A week later, the first mid-grade sword was forged. This mid-grade sword was a meter long with a dark blue hilt. The sword body flickered with a cold light and was suffused with strands of flames. Pouring in a strand of Zhen Yuan, a foot-long flaming sword light shot out with a sizzling sound. The effect of a good foundation had arrived. This fire attribute mid-grade sword was not low-grade, but mid-grade. It should be known that the first low-grade sword that Yi Chen had forged was low-grade. The difficulty of forging a mid-grade sword was more than double or triple. It was at least 5 times more difficult. A sword forged by me in a year is enough for any 7th-grade sect to not have to worry about a lack of swords. Yi Chen smiled and muttered to himself. But a 7th-grade sect doesn't have a half-step king, nor does it have someone who is both a half-step king and a legendary swordsmith. Murong Qingqing descended from the crater. That's true. Yi Chen faintly nodded. A 7th-grade sect producing a half-step king was already a miracle, and this half-step king was a legendary swordsmith. This was no longer a miracle, but a legend. However, after thinking about it, he seemed to fit both criteria. Weren't Sky Cloud sect and Yi family both 7th-grade powers? How is your cultivation? Yi Chen asked. Murong Qingqing said, Dark Devour reached perfection a week ago. I've been cultivating Demonic Fist this week. Not bad. Dark Devour wasn't a high-grade profound martial skill, but only a peak mid-grade profound martial skill. However, due to the Dark Profound's innate tyrannical nature, cultivating it to perfection would have a significant effect on Murong Qingqing's strength. Most importantly, with the Dark Devour as a transition, her Dark Profound would have a huge improvement. Next, she would be able to create a high-grade profound martial skill. As for the demon's demonic fist, this fist art's potential was enormous. With its initial comprehension, Murong Qingqing was able to injure the Darklight King. One could well imagine how powerful it would be once it reached greater completion. It would not be inferior to the majority of high-grade profound martial skills. Just like the previous 2 months, the two of them chatted for a while and then went their separate ways to do their own things. At the Sea of Soul Realm, one would have a lifespan of 300 years, which was equivalent to 10 lifetimes of an ordinary person. Forging mid-grade swords was much more difficult than forging low-grade swords, and the efficiency was also lower. Even after mastering it, one could only forge 5 or 6 mid-grade swords a day. Fortunately, Yi Chen had a lot of patience. Compared to sword forgers at Condensing Reality or Clasping Yuan Realm, his efficiency was astonishing. The higher one's cultivation base, the faster one could do anything. Just like sharpening the edge of a mid-grade sword, there was no need to go through so much trouble. A single stroke of a finger on the blade would make it sharper than anything else. Low-rank great swords can only contain a limited amount of sword intent, and the increase in power is limited as well. Mid-rank great swords are indeed different. I wonder if I can create a high-rank or super-rank upper-rank greatsword. Will its power reach the semi-extreme rank? It should be possible. 5th step Destruction Sword Intent and 4th step Immortal Sword Intent were so powerful that they could contain a single wisp of them. If it were any other half-step king, they would not be able to accomplish such a feat. This was because their sword intent was not as high-grade as Yi Chen's, nor was it as powerful as Yi Chen's. Even if they used special methods to seal it in their swords, it would be far inferior to Yi Chen's. On the contrary, it would take a lot of time and effort. While Yi Chen was forging mid-grade swords, a person was looking for them. This person was none other than the black-robed old man who had been heavily injured by mysterious Yin King in the mysterious Yin Tower. The black-robed old man's arm had been chopped off by mysterious Yin King, and his heart had also suffered a blow, losing several hundred years of cultivation base. Fortunately, the chaotic demon ocean's demonic human clan had many heavenly treasures. After spending a few months, he had completely recovered his cultivation base, returning his strength to its peak. As soon as his cultivation base recovered, the black-robed old man immediately returned to Richlight Oceanspan, searching for traces of Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing. A few days ago, he had arrived at Gemstone Islands and heard the news of Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing flying south. Thus, he chased after them. I didn't expect this kid to be able to kill even Darklight King. His ability is not small. However, he can forget about escaping from me no matter how powerful he is. The black-robed old man sneered. Swish! The black-robed old man broke through space and flew in the void. Every 10,000 miles, he would come out and release his boundless soul force. Everything within a 10,000-mile radius was under his control. Not even the slightest movement of a blade of grass could escape his senses. After half a day, the black-robed old man creased his brows. Could it be that they changed their direction? Or did they fly south without stopping? Every time he appeared, he would be 100,000 li away, which was hundreds of times faster than a half-step king's flying speed. Half a day was equivalent to 200 days of searching for half-step kings. If he couldn't find them, there could only be two reasons. One was that they had changed their direction, and the other was that they were still ahead. I don't believe you can escape to anywhere. Plop! The black-robed old man once again shattered the space and disappeared. I've finally forged a supreme mid-grade sword. Inside the volcano, Yi Chen was holding a golden sword and carefully examining it. This sword's hilt was purple gold, and its body was slender and golden. On both sides of the sword's ridge, exquisite patterns spread out, giving the sword a trace of nobility and sharpness. It was as if a great general had personally arrived on the battlefield, brimming with a king's aura and killing intent. Swoosh! Holding the sword, Yi Chen slashed at the lava lake in front of him, creating a few meters deep and 1 foot wide gully. The sword chi's remaining power did not dissipate as it unexpectedly broke through the volcano's wall and rushed out of the volcano. The sharp sword light seemed indestructible. As I expected, this sword's power is already equivalent to a mid-grade high-grade sword. The golden sword contained the immortal sword intent, which made the sword's body sturdier than any mid-grade sword, capable of clashing head-on with a high-grade sword. Meanwhile, the sword chi was indestructible and extremely hard to destroy. This was the power of the immortal sword intent. The destruction sword intent focused on destructive power, while the immortal sword intent focused on the body's tenacity. Just like Yi Chen, the destruction sword intent focused on killing, while the immortal sword intent focused on suppressing the body. One inside and one outside, perfectly coordinated. Next, I'll focus on raising the quality of the mid-grade sword. I'll try to increase the success rate of forging a supreme mid-grade sword to over 30%. Currently, Yi Chen had 30% chance of forging a mid-grade sword, 40% chance of forging a high-grade sword, and less than 10% chance of forging a supreme-grade sword. This was the only successful sword, and also the one that Yi Chen was most satisfied with. I'll call you Army Destroyer. Extending his right index finger, Yi Chen carved 2 ancient characters on the sword. With his half-step king-level cultivation and 2 great sword intents, carving words on a mid-grade sword was as easy as eating or drinking. Moreover, under his control, this kind of carving would not damage the sword's quality. And Army Destroyer was the first sword he had named after. Casually throwing Army Destroyer into his storage ring, Yi Chen continued forging mid-grade swords. He planned to leave Volcano Island with Murong Qingqing after learning mid-grade sword forging art to perfection. After all, he couldn't stay here forever. As for sword forging art, he could continue learning it after reaching his destination. 2 days passed in a flash. Yi Chen had successfully forged 2 supreme-grade mid-grade swords, with a success rate of nearly 20%. Of these 2 swords, one was of the Thunder attribute, containing the Destruction Sword intent, and the other was of the Water attribute, containing the Immortal Sword intent. The might of the Thunder attribute had already surpassed the Army Destroyer, while the Water attribute was slightly inferior. Why do I have a bad premonition? Suddenly, Yi Chen raised his head. The sky outside the volcano was only the size of a washbasin. White clouds were slowly drifting, and a light breeze was blowing. Tens of thousands of li away, a black-robed old man appeared from the void. As usual, he released his soul power, covering the surrounding 100,000 li. However, the black-robed old man didn't have much hope. Soundlessly, His soul power swept across the volcanic island tens of thousands of miles away. Ha ha! Suddenly, the black-robed old man laughed heartily. 2 people lived on the island, a man and a woman. Who else could they be if not Yi Chen and Murong Qingqing? Let's see where you can run this time. The black-robed old man tore open the space and entered the void. Not good. It's a life and death king. Inside the volcano, Yi Chen's expression changed drastically. His soul power was at the same level as a life and death king. Sensing the black-robed old man's soul power, Yi Chen also sensed the existence of this soul power. The silver vertical eye on his forehead that had just opened closed. At this moment there was no need to use his soul eye. The newcomer was clearly a life and death king, and 80% likely didn't come with good intentions. Rumble! A huge hole appeared on the volcano, and Yi Chen flew out. Murong, run! Yi Chen shouted at Murong Qingqing, who was not far away. Run! Seeing Yi Chen's grave expression, Murong Qingqing's heart skipped a beat. Something that could make Yi Chen's expression change couldn't be anything good. Demonic chi surged as a pair of huge black bat wings unfolded behind Murong Qingqing. Her figure flickered as she tore through the sky, and Yi Chen followed behind her. You think you can run? The island's weather changed. Unknowingly, a revolving energy barrier had covered the entire island like an upside-down bowl. Pung! Murong Qingqing's fist landed on the energy barrier, stirring up ripples, but was unable to break it open. Bewitching mirror shattering. Unsheathing the evil vanquishing sword, Yi Chen used all of his trump cards and forcefully slammed them on the energy barrier. Bewitching mirror shattering contained space profound, and had the innate property of breaking through barriers. It unexpectedly distorted the energy barrier, creating a faintly discernible gap. Just as the two were about to rush out, you actually know space profound sword moves. The black-robed old man was startled. Regardless of whether he admitted it or not, he couldn't compare to Yi Chen in terms of profound martial skills. What a pity, it's futile. The black-robed old man made a grabbing motion in the void, and the distorted energy barrier mended, rapidly strengthening to a meter thick. Chapter 8:17. Yi Chen forcibly suppressed the urge to take out the Sky Scorpio sword. At this moment, the black-robed elder was already approaching. Even if he took out the sword and broke the energy cover, he wouldn't be able to escape from the black-robed elder's control. Therefore, it would be better to wait and see before making a decision. Otherwise, a single Sky Scorpio sword could bring about too many variables. Most importantly, compared to the evil shattering sword, the Sky Scorpio sword consumed several times more Zhen Yuan. One sword strike would probably drain his Zhen Yuan, which was tantamount to seeking his own death. Turning around, Yi Chen's face darkened. What business do you have with us, sir? The black-robed elder slowly walked over and said with a creepy smile, 2 things, take her away and kill you. You really want a life and death struggle? Circulating the Green Lotus sword arts, Yi Chen's Zhen Yuan accumulated to the extreme. The destruction sword soul and immortal sword soul in his sea of soul trembled unceasingly, as if they would fly out at any moment. The black-robed elder was a demonic human king, and his battle power was inestimable. Yi Chen had to push his battle power to the limit, or even surpass it, to have a chance to contend against him. A life and death struggle? You think you're qualified? Stopping dozens of li away, the black-robed elder said disdainfully. Step back a bit. Yi Chen knew that this battle was unavoidable, and it would probably be the most dangerous one since his debut. Tilting his head, he told Murong Qingqing to step back dozens of li to avoid being injured by the shockwaves of the battle. If there was a chance, he would escape first. Be careful. Pursing her lips, Murong Qingqing obediently stepped back. However, it was impossible for her to escape by herself. But now was not the time to distract Yi Chen. Yi Chen nodded, and his eyes moved back to the black-robed elder. Seems like you won't give up without a fight? The black-robed elder said. Yi Chen said, I, Yi Chen, have never given up without a fight. Not this time, and not in the future. If you want my life, come. While speaking, he took out 10 supreme clear pills and put them in his mouth. At this critical moment, he needed supreme clear pills to recover his Zhen Yuan. The black-robed old man was confident of his victory, so he didn't try to stop him. Are you ready? His voice became sharp. Bring it on. Haha, go to hell. From dozens of miles away, the black-robed elder threw out a palm attack towards Yi Chen. This palm attack did not use any profound sense martial arts, it was just pure Zhen Yuan palm energy. However, the palm energy that had been thrown out by the human demon king was horrifying to the extreme. Once the palm attack was thrown out, the clouds in the sky sped up 100 times faster than before. The seawater was split into two, creating a miraculous deep ditch. As for the volcanic island, half of it was destroyed by the palm attack, while the other half was on the elder's side. The shattered pieces did not scatter in all directions. Instead, they floated in the air, motionless. It turned out that the black-robed old man's palm strike had turned the area within 1,000 li into a vacuum. At the same time, the sky darkened completely. Demonic chi surged, as if doomsday had arrived. However, this alone was not enough to make Yi Chen's expression change. What truly caused his expression to change was that the space in front of him had shattered into thousands of pieces like a mirror. This was a strengthened version of bewitching mirror shattering, and its might was more than doubled. Waning moon? Don't take it as a joke. Yi Chen roared, and a cyan chi flow spread out with him as the center. In the next moment, a boundless sword domain covered hundreds of li. Numerous cyan swords condensed and shot out, facing the incoming attack. It's sword domain. The black-robed old man's mind turned at lightning speed. Among life and death sword kings, there were not more than 3 who possessed sword domain. He only knew one. Sword domain's might was vast, combining defense, suppression, and offense. If a life and death sword king enveloped him with sword domain, the black-robed old man's only thought would be to escape. He would run as fast and as far as he could. If he couldn't escape, he would be tortured to death without any hope. Unfortunately, Yi Chen's sword domain was merely in embryonic form, and his cultivation base was a whole realm lower than the black-robed old man's. Not to mention embryonic form, even if Yi Chen had grasped the true sword domain, he wouldn't be afraid. The reason he was astonished was because Yi Chen had grasped sword domain too early, surpassing common sense. Sword domain alone was not enough. Yi Chen brandished the evil vanquishing sword, and the strongest sword move, bewitching mirror shattering, accompanied by a cyan sword rain, shot out. Ding 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 ding, kacha kacha kacha, pung pung pung, countless clashing noises were heard as a galaxy seemed to have appeared between Yi Chen and the black-robed old man. Within the galaxy, the sword light was bright and dazzling. Transparent cracks spread out in all directions, seeming like the sharpest godly blade. Wherever it passed, everything would be destroyed. In the end, all the energy shattered into energy streams, and a huge black blurry hand pierced through the colorful energy streams and slammed into Yi Chen's protective Zhen Yuan. Puff! Yi Chen spurted out a mouthful of blood. His protective Zhen Yuan, which had been reinforced by the pseudo-extreme grade bronze armor, couldn't even withstand a single blow. The hazy palm imprint landed on his chest. Immediately, a majestic power passed through the armor and into his body. At this moment, he felt as if his internal organs were about to shatter. His chest seemed to have caved in, and his back was protruding out. So powerful! Too powerful! The reason why Yi Chen didn't die was because of the bronze armor, the dragon bone layer covering his skin, and the undying body, which gave him a tenacious life force. Even so, the black-robed old man's weakened palm still nearly tore him into pieces. Yi Chen had finally experienced the might of a demonic human king. The gap between the two could no longer be calculated with logic. They were not on the same level at all. Gulp. Swallowing a supreme clear pellet, he took out a handful of yuan qi replenishing upper-grade pellets from his storage ring and stuffed them all into his mouth, then swallowed them all. Impossible! He didn't die. The black-robed old man was greatly surprised. How powerful a life and death king was. As long as one knew they could shatter the void, it would be enough. Although his palm strike had been mostly neutralized by Yi Chen's sword domain and bewitching mirror shattering, the remaining power was still enough to easily kill a strongest half-step king, even if the latter was wearing a pseudo-extreme grade artifact. Not bad. I have to have a whole new level of respect for you. The black-robed old man stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a trace of graveness in his eyes. Given time, when Yi Chen entered life and death realm, he would become a frightening enemy. Since he was an enemy, he would have to cut the weeds and remove the root. Otherwise, the consequences would be unbearable. Yi Chen's body was stooped, and his aura was extremely weak. He seemed like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any moment. However, his eyes were extremely bright as they fixedly stared at the black-robed old man. Inside his body, the yuan qi of the pellets was surging. Under the operation of the undying body, it was rapidly nourishing his body and restoring his vitality. Seeing Yi Chen's aura rising, showing signs of recovering to his peak, the black-robed old man's expression changed. What was he seeing? A mere half-step king had actually comprehended the undying body. This was an ability only life and death kings possessed, and it was one of the symbols of life and death kings. No, it still hasn't reached the level of broken limb rebirth. The black-robed old man's undying body was the first realm of broken limb rebirth, so he naturally knew the mysteries of broken limb rebirth. Although the recovery speed of Yi Chen's undying body was far inferior to broken limb rebirth, it still couldn't be underestimated. After all, such a heavy injury had been recovered by 70 to 80%. Let's see how many palms you can take. Without using any profound martial skill, the black-robed old man extended his right hand, intending to strike at Yi Chen. He believed that this palm strike could absolutely kill the latter. It should be known that the latter had been injured so heavily by him even at his peak, and had yet to recover. Demonic fist. Abruptly, the bat wings on Murong Qingqing's back blossomed with a dazzling black radiance. With a flap of the bat wings, Murong Qingqing's speed rose to an unprecedented limit. In less than 1/100th of a blink, she arrived above the black-robed old man and punched down. This punch was like a small shining black sun, indestructible and indestructible. It was unknown if the black-robed old man couldn't react in time or if he didn't care, but he actually let Murong Qingqing's punch hit him. Boom! When the fist was 3 feet away from the black-robed old man, a layer of black qi blocked Murong Qingqing's fist, and a ferocious qi burst out, soaring into the sky. Pop! The qi wall shattered, and Murong Qingqing was sent flying. The black-robed old man laughed. Worthy of the perfect demonic human bloodline, you have so many secrets. Your punch just now contained an impure king-level demonic power, otherwise it would have been impossible to break my true yuan qi wall. Good, the more potential you have, the more secrets you have, the more benefits my demonic human clan will have. Even a punch containing demonic power essence couldn't touch him? Murong Qingqing's face revealed a trace of bitterness. The demonic power essence in her body came from the demonic beast kings in the parallel space battlefield, and its purity was equivalent to king-level demonic power. As she entered the half-step king realm, the diluted demonic power essence was also close to king-level demonic power. Combined with the demonic power fist, Murong Qingqing originally thought she could slightly threaten the black-robed old man. However, the latter's strength was completely beyond her expectations. In other words, she had never truly understood the strength of life and death kings or demonic human kings. She had merely made some guesses. 6-way sky ceiling array. Withdrawing his smile, the black-robed old man threw out 6 crystal pillars, which pierced through the void and landed around Murong Qingqing. In the next moment, a large number of crystal light screens exploded, interconnecting and forming a sealed crystal space. Murong Qingqing was trapped inside, floating in the air. You can have a good rest inside. After I kill him, I'll bring you back. The black-robed old man no longer looked at Murong Qingqing, and his gaze fell on Yi Chen. Yi Chen's injuries had already completely recovered, and his aura was like a beacon. A year ago, his undying body had already faintly touched upon the second realm, limb regrowth. His recovery speed was much faster than before. Admittedly, the black-robed old man's palm had left him on the verge of death, but as long as his body wasn't destroyed, his recovery would be quick. Of course, the initial stage of the undying body had its limit. He didn't dare to be sure how many strikes he could endure. I can't take a second strike. Yi Chen glanced at Murong Qingqing, who was trapped in the crystal space, and a resolute light flickered in his eyes. His storage ring flickered with a dim light, and a peerless sword with a boundless might appeared in Yi Chen's hand. Without unsheathing the sword, a world-slaughtering sword qi spread out, engulfing the surroundings. With the Sky Scorpio sword in hand, Yi Chen's aura rose again and again, as if there was no limit. At this moment, he seemed to be able to contend against the black-robed old man. Chapter 8:18. Huff, huff. Being hit by the seemingly tangible sword qi, the black-robed old man's pupils suddenly shrank, turning into two dots. Extreme-grade sword. That's right, it's an extreme-grade sword. Only an extreme-grade sword can have this kind of might. Moreover, it's not an ordinary extreme-grade sword. Its sword qi is so powerful. The black-robed old man's heartbeat sped up. Although he didn't use swords, it didn't stop him from using them as a means of attack. Taking a step back, with this extreme-grade sword, he could trade with other life and death kings for things he wanted. Kid, hand over the sword, and I'll leave your corpse intact. The black-robed old man sucked in a deep breath and said in a sinister tone, If you want it, you'll have to ask it first. Yi Chen held up the sword with both of his hands, and a beam of purple light shot out. The surrounding surreal space was illuminated by the purple light, and countless tiny purple crystal grains started to condense. Although these crystal grains were mostly purple in color, there were some differences as well. Some were purple-red, some were purple-yellow, some were purple-green, and some were purple-gold. Obviously, these were the crystallization of different elements of natural yuan qi. It's one of the top 10 miraculous metals, purple crystal iron. Seeing the mystical aspect of the Sky Scorpio sword, the black-robed old man couldn't restrain his palpitating heart. Purple crystal iron was extremely hard to find. An extreme-grade sword containing purple crystal iron would increase its value by at least 30%. Let go. The black-robed old man's body was like a ghost as he rapidly approached Yi Chen. His pair of powerful hands emitting a black metallic luster attempted to snatch the Sky Scorpio sword from Yi Chen's hand. Ding! The black-robed old man's speed was too fast. Yi Chen closed his eyes and, relying on his soul power and intuition, slashed at the void, clashing with the opponent's palm. Spiritual sword. The Sky Scorpio sword had clearly struck a solid object, but at the same time, a majestic power passed through the sword and into Yi Chen's body. Swish! Holding the Sky Scorpio sword, Yi Chen shot out in the air, creating a purple-black shockwave in front of him. The black-clothed old man didn't move from his original position. He wasn't pushed back, but there was a faint bloodstain on his palm. On the surface of the bloodstain, thin purple crystals spread out, wanting to cover his palm. Within the bloodstain, crystals were also seeping in. Crack! A powerful Zhen Yuan poured into his palm, shattering the crystal and shaking it off. The black-robed old man licked his lips. What a powerful crystallization power. It can actually threaten me. If Yi Chen were not at mid-half-step king warrior level, but at the first or second level of life and death challenge, the black-robed elder might not be able to easily shake out the crystallized power. This power was too strange, it seemed like it could crystallize anything. After being pushed back dozens of li, Yi Chen's arms were aching. The human demon king was too powerful. Even through the sky Scorpio sword, his arms were still under enormous pressure. If it were the evil vanquishing sword, his arms would have been broken by now. Unfortunately, you don't deserve such a treasured sword. The black-robed old man attacked once again. This time, his movement art had already surpassed the realm of phantoms. As for why he didn't meet force with force and kill Yi Chen directly, no one knew. Perhaps he wanted to snatch the Sky Scorpio sword before killing Yi Chen, or perhaps he was playing a cat-and-mouse game. 1 turned into 10, 10 turned into 100, and 100 turned into 1,000. In the void, the black-robed old man's silhouette flickered incessantly. Under his influence, the sky seemed to be covered by a black curtain, and the old man's silhouette moved wantonly within this black curtain. Soul eye open! Yi Chen's soul power could no longer keep up with the black-robed old man's movements. In his perception, black-robed old men were everywhere. As the silver vertical eye opened, Yi Chen once again closed his eyes, replacing them with the silver vertical eye. What the silver vertical eye saw was a silver world. In this silver world, the black-robed old man's speed slowed down, until it finally reached the level that Yi Chen could react to. At this moment, Yi Chen felt like he was watching a movie, except that the people in the movie could come and kill him at any time. Oh, another new ability. The black-robed old man had seen too many miracles on Yi Chen. Sword domain, Sky Scorpio sword, Soul Eye. He really wanted to know what other trump cards Yi Chen could take out in this desperate situation. This was also the reason why he didn't directly kill Yi Chen. In his eyes, the Sky Scorpio sword was already in the bag. How could a cooked duck fly? If it could fly, then it wasn't a cooked duck. Without a sound, the black-robed old man appeared in front of Yi Chen, his claw reaching out. I've been waiting for you. Although Yi Chen's attacking speed wasn't as fast as the black-robed old man, he had the soul eye, which allowed him to see through the black-robed old man's movements one step ahead. When the opponent approached, Yi Chen was already prepared, slashing out with his sword. This sword was Waning Moon, the waning moon performed by the Sky Scorpio sword. The purple-black crescent-shaped sword energy was like an extremely thin crystal. As it collided with the black-robed old man's palm, a large amount of purple crystals exploded, as if a crystal firework had been set off. Amidst the fireworks, the two rapidly retreated. Huff! Heavily gasping for air, Yi Chen hurriedly swallowed 3 upper clarity pills. From the start of the battle until now, Yi Chen hadn't stopped swallowing pellets. Of the 10 upper clarity pills, only 2 were left. This was also the reason why he could use the Sky Scorpio sword twice in a row. Feeling the Zhen Yuan within his body rapidly recovering, Yi Chen's silver vertical eye unwaveringly stared at the black-robed old man, not daring to relax in the slightest. Dozens of li away, more than half of the black-robed old man's protective Zhen Yuan had been crystallized. His right hand and right arm were also covered in a layer of purple crystals. They were fragmented, but carried a frightening destructive power. Even if the opponent was a demonic human king, he would still be affected. It's indeed a powerful supreme-grade sword. The black-robed old man didn't seem to care. With a shake of his body, countless purple crystals were shattered. The crystallized power couldn't enter his body at all. This was the gap between their cultivation bases, which couldn't be made up for. Not even the supreme-grade sword could. Still not enough? Yi Chen's brows creased. This was the first time he felt such hopeless despair. Even when he was still at Clasping Yuan Realm and encountered Taoist Jin Huang of Floating Mountain, he didn't feel such despair. This kind of despair didn't only come from his soul, but also from his battle intent. Even if there's no hope, I'll create it. The negative emotions were instantly destroyed. Yi Chen's gaze turned sharper, as if he had broken through a new boundary. With one more step, he would reach a new peak. You still haven't given up? Hee hee, that's good. It won't be fun if you give up too early. As a demonic human king, the black-robed old man didn't feel happy about killing a lower-realm martial artist. It was like stepping on an ant. Who would care? If the ant was special, wouldn't it be less fun to step on it? Bewitching mirror shattering. As the black-robed old man spoke, Yi Chen took the initiative to attack. With a swing of his sword, the void was dyed purple and began to distort rapidly. In the next moment, the black-robed old man seemed to be sealed in another world. If the previous bewitching mirror shattering looked like a mirror, then this time, under the sky Scorpio sword, looked like a huge purple crystal screen. Break! Yi Chen let out a low roar as his Zhen Yuan was completely drained by the sky Scorpio sword. With a loud bang, the purple crystal screen shattered, and the black-robed old man inside was also shattered into millions of pieces, turning into a light rain that scattered in all directions. Something's wrong. Swallowing the last 2 upper cleansing pellets, Yi Chen rapidly retreated. Rumble! The place where Yi Chen was originally at caved in, and a huge hole appeared in the space. The edge of the hole was filled with cracks like glass. Unknowingly, the black-robed old man had already escaped from the bewitching mirror shattering, and instantly approached. If you were a member of my demonic human clan, how great would it be? To be honest, the black-robed old man had never met such an outstanding genius like Yi Chen. Whether it was profound sense martial arts, sword will, innate ability, battle skills, or instant reaction, they were all out of this world. Although the 2 perfect demonic humans in their clan were also outstanding, it was only their bloodline that was outstanding. In terms of innate talent and comprehension, they were far inferior to Yi Chen. The bewitching mirror shattering actually couldn't lock onto him. In the distance, Yi Chen's complexion was extremely unsightly. Clearly, the scene just now was an illusion. The black-robed old man simply wasn't sealed in the purple crystal screen. He reckoned that he had already shattered the void a moment ago. Although the bewitching mirror shattering could also affect the depths of the void with the amplification of the sky Scorpio sword, it was clearly much weaker and couldn't do anything to the black-robed old man. It could be said that the gap between life and death kings and half-step kings was not only in terms of cultivation base, but also in the void shattering. Unfortunately, you're not a member of my clan. The black-robed old man's expression suddenly turned gloomy, and his killing intent surged. At this moment, he had decided to kill Yi Chen, because the latter couldn't possibly have any trump cards left. Looking at the black-robed old man brimming with killing intent, Yi Chen's expression strangely relaxed. The Zhen Yuan in his body had more or less recovered after being dissolved by the 2 upper cleansing pellet. Then, he unblocked the dragon god metal, and a large amount of Zhen Yuan flowed into his body, instantly recovering 90%. I indeed can't defeat you, but it can. The storage ring flickered with a dim light, and an ink painting appeared in Yi Chen's left hand. The painting unfolded and fluttered in the wind. This is? The black-robed old man's gaze fell on the painting in Yi Chen's hand. It was a painting of a person standing on a mountain peak, gazing into the distance. One could only see his back, majestic and elegant. Holding one end of the painting, Yi Chen operated his Zhen Yuan and poured it into the painting. Buzz. A strange scene happened. As Yi Chen poured in his Zhen Yuan, the painting came to life. The mountain peak turned solid, and the view in the distance was deep and vast. The grass and trees were deep and serene. Meanwhile, the back of the figure on the mountain peak started to flutter in the wind, as if there was a wind blowing out of the painting. The figure turned around. His face was indistinct, but his eyes strangely shone, as if he could see through the entire world and land on the black-robed old man's body. Thump! The black-robed old man's heart skipped a beat. Not only did the opponent's gaze penetrate the painting and land on him, it even brought him a strange pressure. Chapter 8:19. Now that you've brought out this painting, you'll have to resolve the future crisis of True Water Palace ruins. Staring at the black-robed old man, the person in the painting said to Yi Chen. Yi Chen sucked in a deep breath and asked, Senior, what does the crisis of True Water Palace ruins represent? Is it the resurrection of the dead? If only it were that simple. The person in the painting sighed. Senior, who are you? Yi Chen boldly asked. Yuan Songhai. Yuan Songhai? Why does this name sound so familiar? The black-robed old man's face revealed a bitter expression. Suddenly, his expression changed as he cried out in alarm, Yuan Emperor, Yuan Songhai. You're Yuan Emperor? Yuan Emperor? Yi Chen was also startled. The last person to leave an imprint on the Emperor's scar stele was Yuan Emperor. Yuan Emperor had an innate physique, and his Zhen Yuan could be said to be boundless. If the person in the painting was truly Yuan Emperor, it would be too outrageous. The person in the painting faintly smiled. Turns out there's still someone who remembers my name. The words of the man in the picture undoubtedly told Yi Chen and the black-robed old man that he was the last titled monarch of True Spirit Continent or True Spirit World who could leave his imprint on Emperor's scar stele, Yuan Emperor. Senior, rest assured. If I have the ability, Yi Chen is willing to resolve the crisis of True Water Palace ruins. If I don't, then Senior has misjudged me. Yi Chen solemnly said. Misjudged me? Hee, you're quite honest. Yuan Emperor smiled. The black-robed old man's expression changed several times. Ultimately, his expression turned sinister. Even if you're Yuan Emperor, so what? The real Yuan Emperor is already dead. You're nothing but a projection left behind by him. You think you can defeat me with your projection? Why don't you try? The Yuan Emperor stepped out of the painting and appeared in the real world. The ink marks on his body gradually faded away. At first glance, he didn't look any different from a real person. However, when he used his soul power to sense, he found that this body was a bit blurry and illusory. I'll give it a try. Watch me blow you up. Magic mark annihilation. When fighting with Yi Chen, the black-robed old man did not use any profound martial arts, but the image of the Yuan Emperor was different. Before knowing the opponent's strength, it was better to be more serious. Otherwise, if he was careless and suffered a great loss, it would not be worth it. With a palm strike, a dark crack appeared in the void. It was like a brand that was about to be branded on the body of the Yuan Emperor. It was overbearing and powerful, and there was no way to dodge it. Yi Chen squinted his eyes. If the black-robed old man had used a profound martial skill before, even with the Sky Scorpio sword, he wouldn't have been able to block it. The gap was too big. Profound is too low. The projection of Yuan Emperor shook his head, pointed a finger at the dark crack, and then casually wiped it. Puff! The dark crack vanished like smoke in thin air, as if it had never existed. Damn it! Demonic Tao River! The black-robed old man roared and pushed his Zhen Yuan to the limit. His whole body emitted a dazzling black crystal light as he stretched out both of his hands, pushing toward the projection of Yuan Emperor. It was as if he was pushing a huge millstone, wanting to grind the projection of Yuan Emperor alive. Demon's martial skill? Watching the Black River surging over and collapsing the space, the projection of Yuan Emperor's expression was indifferent as he punched out. Bang! The Black River exploded and black splashes filled the sky. It was as if a huge fountain had erupted between the two of them. The might of the fist of Yuan Emperor's projection had already reached an extreme level, shocking the ancients and dazzling the contemporaries. Impossible! How can a projection be so powerful? The black-robed old man was blasted away, gliding in the void for dozens of li before stabilizing his body. You're too weak. Low-grade martial skill, low-grade martial will. Is this the level of life and death kings? The projection of Yuan Emperor stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and said indifferently, "Don't be too arrogant. Your era has long passed." The black-robed old man's long hair fluttered in the air as strange black patterns appeared on both of his hands, covering his entire palms. As the black patterns took shape, his aura abruptly soared. The frightening Zhen Yuan ripple caused the space to tremble and cracks to appear everywhere. I've already refined the supreme grade gloves into my body. Not bad. Raising his brows, the projection of Yuan Emperor nodded. Die. The black-robed old man didn't care who the opponent was. As long as they obstructed him, they would die. He thrust out his palm, and an even deeper black crack imprinted itself on the projection of Yuan Emperor. It was precisely demonic mark destruction. The projection of Yuan Emperor's expression didn't change. His figure flickered, and the space seemed to disappear as he retreated 10 li. The black crack didn't imprint itself on the projection of Yuan Emperor. It merely remained in the void, not dispersing for a long time. Such means, such a movement. This was the first time Yi Chen saw two life and death kings exchanging blows. The methods of the black-robed old man astonished him. He could actually leave a mark in the void that didn't disperse for a long time. If this mark was imprinted on a person's body, would they be tortured to death? On the other hand, Yuan Emperor's movement was simply unfathomable. His movements seemed to have already dispelled the boundaries of the void, making it impossible for the black-robed old man to lock onto him. The black-robed old man was 100 times more astonished than Yi Chen. He was extremely clear on the might of demonic scar annihilation. This kind of move could only be resisted head-on, and couldn't be evaded. As long as the black crack locked onto one's life aura, it wouldn't stop until one died. Even if one hid in the void, it wouldn't work. Previously, when Yuan Emperor's projection destroyed the black crack with a finger, he could still accept it, because demonic scar annihilation could be destroyed. But now, the projection of Yuan Emperor had actually evaded it, causing it to lose its target and imprint itself in the void. This body of mine has limited energy. I won't bother with you anymore. Sword, come. Yuan Emperor's projection, who had retreated 10 li away, waved his hand. The evil vanquishing sword on Yi Chen's waist automatically unsheathed and landed in the hand of Yuan Emperor's projection. Yi Chen didn't even have time to react. You want the evil vanquishing sword? Yi Chen didn't understand. According to reason, the Sky Scorpio sword was more powerful than the evil vanquishing sword. With the Sky Scorpio sword in hand, Yuan Emperor's projection could easily kill the black-robed old man. Yuan Emperor's projection seemed to know Yi Chen's thoughts and said, "The evil vanquishing sword contains the power of evil vanquishing and is targeted at demonic humans. Moreover, that supreme-grade sword of yours consumes too much Jin Yuan. With my current body, I can't bear too much. Moreover, the evil vanquishing sword is enough for me." So that's how it is. Yi Chen nodded. This was Yuan Emperor's projection, not Yuan Emperor himself. He didn't have nearly inexhaustible Zhen Yuan. His energy was limited, and it would naturally be best if he could consume as little as possible. Void Yuan Chop. Holding the evil vanquishing sword, Yuan Emperor's projection's gaze turned sharp. With a wave of his hand, the evil vanquishing sword shot out an invisible sword chi, chopping towards the black-robed old man's body. The black-robed old man roared. He couldn't even sense the trajectory of this sword, but his intuition told him that if he was hit by this sword head-on, he would definitely die. Devil Flash. His body flickered. The black-robed old man's body flickered like a flickering star. Poochie. The invisible sword chi chopped on the black-robed old man's illusory body, but it seemed to have missed. However, Yi Chen didn't think so, because blood splashed and a faint groan could be heard. Just as he expected, the illusory body shattered, and a real arm fell off. It was crushed into a bloody mist by the sword chi, then disappeared into nothingness. In the distance, the black-robed old man's body appeared. His face was pale, and his right arm had already disappeared, looking extremely uncoordinated. Why did I get hit? The black-robed old man was shocked. The Devil Flash was also a martial art of the demons. Although the demon's martial art didn't require one to cultivate profound, in fact, the devil flash still contained the power of space. It was just that the form was different from the space profound, but the essence was no different. He thought that by using the devil flash, he would be able to escape, but his right arm was still chopped off. Yuan Emperor curled his lips. You're lucky. My current strength is far from the real me, and the Void Yuan Chop is my weakest move. Other martial arts consume too much energy. Yi Chen was dumbfounded. The strength of the Yuan Emperor's projection was definitely far from the Yuan Emperor's. The gap was huge, and the Void Yuan Chop was his weakest move. Even so, the black-robed old man, who was a demonic human king, couldn't withstand a single blow from him. From this, it could be inferred how powerful the real Yuan Emperor was. However, I've already seen through your movement trajectory. This time, I'll destroy you. The Yuan Emperor's projection raised the evil vanquishing sword for the second time, and lightly chopped. No! The black-robed old man fled in terror, falling into the void. But under the pursuit of the Void Yuan Chop, the space boundary became transparent. Yi Chen could even see the black-robed old man fleeing in the void. His expression was one of terror, wishing that his parents had given him an extra pair of legs. Such power, worthy of being the Yuan Emperor who shook the world in the past. At this time, countless black petals fell from the void. These petals were only the size of copper coins, and they had clear lines and a soft texture. They were no different from real petals. These black petals were endless, falling from the sky like a rain of petals. And this rain of petals ignored the existence of the boundaries of space, falling into the outside world and then continuing to fall. The moment they touched the ground, they turned from solid to illusory, vanishing. Puff! Behind the black-robed old man, flower petals gushed out, and a beautiful woman wearing a gorgeous black robe suddenly appeared. This woman was extremely tall, and her eyes were a faint red. Her towering breasts were just right. She rubbed her right hand, and an invisible force surged out, then she waved it to the side. Chi! The invisible sword Chi turned around and disappeared into the depths of the void. Great Patriarch! Hearing this voice, the black-robed old man's tense nerves relaxed, and a joyful expression flashed across his face. Then, he turned around and respectfully saluted the black-robed woman. The chaotic demon sees Great Patriarch. Isn't he the demonic human emperor? Yi Chen secretly cursed. The demonic human tribe was divided into clans. Generally, the patriarch of a clan was the patriarch. Only the patriarch of the entire clan was called the Great Patriarch. Oh, a strong one came. Kid, you've offended a lot of people. The Yuan Emperor's projection frowned, looking helplessly at Yi Chen. Yi Chen smiled wryly. What will come, I can't avoid it. Obviously, the other side came for Morong Qingqing. A mere demonic human emperor wasn't worthy of coming personally.